communities like Shettleston. I remember when I got elected in 2017, it was all BBC News, Laura Kuenssberg was talking about all this sort of stuff. It was huge that Tories had won Shettleston. And I thought, this is a massive step for us, we can do. And then I was told I had to go and campaign in East Renfrewshire, I had to go and campaign in Dumfries, I had to go and speak to people in the north east of Scotland, and I thought, this place in the Central Belt that you're just ignoring, you're falling into the exact same trap as every other party. I'm not saying it's not a legitimate conversation at the left, and John Swinney and other people will have, which is they believe that we raise taxes because you have a social contract. I get that argument, I understand it, I just fundamentally disagree with it passionately. I just don't think that that's the vision that Scotland needs. Well, I'm talking about drug dealers, you're talking about the people who are then supplying the drugs. So there's a difference between the young people who are stuck in care who then hand over the drugs to the people that are giving them the drugs to then give away. There's a big difference. In 2012, I believe it was, Nicola Sturgeon, when she was Deputy First Minister, changed our homelessness legislation to say that if you're anybody at all and claim that you're homeless, you should be entitled to a homelessness unit. So a homelessness bed straight away. So what you're finding, and anybody will tell you this across the UK, that rule doesn't exist in England, Wales and Northern Ireland. So when you're granted leave to remain by the Home Office, so once you went through the system and you're granted and you've said you've got 30 days to find accommodation, otherwise we'll have to send you back, what they're all doing is coming to Scotland, claiming they're homeless, because they're then automatically given a homelessness bed.
So welcome to Social Sessions. Today we're joined with Councillor Thomas Kerr. How you doing, Thomas?
I'm good. All the better for being here.
It's brilliant to have you on, and obviously we're going to cover a range of topics, but I'm just going to kind of take you back to your own. It was really interesting to see that you grew up kind of in the East End of Glasgow and faced some of the kind of some of the stuff you did, but I'll let you talk about it.
So I grew up in Cranhill, East End of Glasgow, best place of the city, where I represent now in Shettleston. I went to school there as well. But when I had grew up, both my parents were both drug addicts. I've been dead open about that in my past. My dad's sadly no longer with us. He passed away in 2016. My mum's still here. She went through rehab and she's now working with homelessness people in the city. So she's fantastic, remarkable woman. So that was sort of where my politics and my slight interest in social justice started, was because of that. Because when I grew up in Cranhill, it was the best place in the world to grow up in. Absolutely brilliant place to grow up in, brilliant people, but every single person was going through the same thing. Everybody's parent was either drug addict, alcoholic, or were really, really struggling with poverty. So you were all kind of sort of in a community. So I never realised how bad things were until I moved away with my mum. But it was the best experience ever growing up in that sort of environment where you really have people that were a proper community, which I don't think you get anymore, and it was great.
No, and I think we kind of touched on that, and we've touched on it before, like the lack of community in probably a lot of places, and I don't know what that's doing to maybe social media, like there's loads of things, but there definitely is something that's no the way it used to be when I remember going to like my granny's in Proven Mill or whatever. Do you know what I mean? What do you think that is? Would you put that down as just as a kind of councillor?
Do you know, I don't actually know, because in some areas you still get that sort of community that still exists. And I've always said the East End, it's why I can imagine staying anywhere else other than the East End of Glasgow, because you get that sense of community around people. So where I stay now in Springboy is still the exact same. Your neighbours still talk to each other. I've got a really, really close family. Me and my gran and my granda and everybody are really, really close. So I speak to them. There's no day goes past where I don't phone my mum to have a chat with her about something, or I don't speak to my gran or my cousins or whatever else. So I've got that relationship. So it's quite difficult to pinpoint as to how it's moved on. But it clearly has, and I don't know if it's social media. There's a part of me that thinks that we sort of import stuff how the Americans do stuff. And it used to be there used to be really big communities. Now you've got these sort of gated areas where you go in, shut your door and you never talk to anybody. And I kind of feel like these new built areas in Scotland have kind of fell into that trap where you don't have that sort of engagement with your neighbours. So it's a shame, but because you really need it. It shows people some sort of camaraderie. I mean, I couldn't imagine growing up the way that I grew up and no having my pals to kick about with, to hang about at the backs or whatever else. And you were all, skint. But you had the best childhood ever growing up with these sort of kids. And then you'd go into your house where it was horrible, some of the stuff that you had to go through, but you knew you had that sort of camaraderie with your pals outside. I can imagine what it must be like for kids these days.
And I think it's dead interesting that you've managed to kind of go down the path that you've went down. Do you know what I mean? Rather than maybe go down a path of crime or kind of addiction or whatever.
Well,
do you know what I mean?
I made the decision, and I turned 14. My mum had my wee sister, so I was basically grew up as an only child, and then Zoe came along when I was 14 years old, so I was just at the stage where I didn't want my ma's attention anyway, so it worked out quite well for me. But when she was born, my mum, I spoke about this before, my mum relapsed again, and at that point I'd always had an interest in politics, but I was away wanting to go and study journalism and do something else. But I decided I wanted to go into politics because of what I'd went through.
Aye.
And because when Zoe came along, I thought, I'm going to make sure that you don't have to grow up the way that I grew up. I don't want any kid to have to go through the pain that I went through when I lost my dad.
Yeah.
I don't want any kid to grow up thinking that they're no as good as anybody else because of the circumstances that they grew up in. So it's why I've been so open about my background. One of the first interviews I done when I got elected as a councillor was talking about it because I wanted to show kids, particularly in East End of Glasgow, that it doesn't matter who you are, what your background is, you can work hard to achieve something. And it gave me this sort of grounding from my politics. So no matter where I go politically, and I get attacked all the time for people, and that's politics, that's fine. I know I'm in it for the right reasons because I got into politics because of that. It was nothing else other than the fact that I wanted to transform people's lives. And I thought the best route to do that is through policy changes. You can go into teaching, you can go into social work, you can try and help kids as much as you want, but the reality is governments set the policies that they people then have to implement. And if you really want to change somebody's life, you need to get into politics properly.
No, I agree with you. So, obviously, like that taking reform, that's no a part of it for me, but we'll go into that later. But it's interesting that you've got such a kind of interest in politics and coming for that background because a lot of people don't. Do you know what I mean? A lot of people, I think, this is only my take on it, I think a lot of the time politicians are able to kind of con the working class into maybe going a certain road because they're no interested in politics and they'll watch the mainstream media and they'll take everything that's for gospel, which kind of said on the STV news at 6 o'clock. So I suppose my question is, how did you kind of manage to go to reform? How did that come about?
So it's interesting because what you just said is exactly what I've always thought about politicians. It's why I went to the Tories before I went to Reform. So when I grew up in Shettleston in the East End, the way that it was you were two parties, right? You either supported independence, you went to the SNP, but I never supported independence. So for me, the SNP was never a question. I just couldn't go to that party. So your other one was Labour, and you had to pick one or the other. So I went and campaigned for the Labour Party, and I met all these people. Margaret Curran, who was the MP for the area, was a brilliant woman, fantastic woman, really, really good, inspired me to get into politics properly. But the people around her were awful. I mean, awful people. The way they used to speak about people in my areas, the way they used to speak about people in communities. Used to have these guys, I call them in the navy blue suits, that would turn up to Cranhill and lecture people about, well, if only you could get rid of the Tories because they're all rich, if only the SNP weren't there because they're this or that. And I used to think, where's your positive attitude for what it is you're going to do? Instead, politics was also negative and about this or that or them or this. And I used to have people that used to say to me, oh, well, I remember going out campaigning once in Shettleston and somebody saying about poverty. This was in the 2010 general election, so Tony Blair and Gordon Brown had been in power since 1997. And somebody said to them about, but you've been in charge and poverty's still at massive levels. And the guy said, but that's because of Margaret Thatcher in the 1980s. And I sat and I looked, Margaret Thatcher wasn't even prime. I was born in 1996. I was born after Thatcher had been in power. I was alive 1 year into John Major and then Tony Blair came in. These guys are the establishment and you're still using the big bag bogey woman in the 1980s. It's not going to wash from me. So at that point I decided Labour's no for me. SNP wasn't for me. I had remembered watching Annabelle Goldie on one of the programmes that she'd done in 2011 for the Scottish Parliament elections, and I quite liked the cut of her jib. I thought, do you know what? I don't agree with everything you're saying, but you're being honest with the public. And I think it was something around tuition fees that she was saying, I don't support free tuition fees, I support a graduate tax because people who can pay should pay, but people who can't should get support, or something like that. And I thought, I've never heard a politician speak so honestly about that. So I got involved with the Scottish Conservatives, and the first person I ever met was Ruth Davidson. It was when she wasn't even an MSP, she was working for Annabelle at the time. She came and picked me up to go campaigning. And I thought, my God, this woman's brilliant. This is my sort of politics. There was a positivity around you. You were wanted to campaign for stuff. I believed in the values of you work hard, play by the rules, you should be rewarded. I always believed that when you put a ladder down for people, you should be able to help them climb up. And my idea was always that Labour and the SNP put that ladder there for themselves to get up, and then they pull the ladder away, keep working class people in their place because they don't want people experiencing what you can get if you work hard and whatever else. So I went to the Tories. 14 years I've been in the Tory party though. I was hitting my head off a brick wall by the end of it. The first few years were fantastic. As I said, Ruth Davidson was there. There was a positivity. Around 2017 onwards, when I got elected as a councillor, I seen the Tory party change and it fell into its old traditions. So communities like Shettleston, I remember when I got elected in 2017, it was all BBC News, Laura Kuenssberg was talking about all this sort of stuff. It was huge that Tories had won Shettleston. And I thought, this is a massive step for us, we can do. And then I was told I had to go and campaign in East Renfrewshire, I had to go and campaign in Dumfries, I had to go and speak to people in the north east of Scotland, and I thought, oh, this place in the Central Belt that you're just ignoring, you're falling into the exact same trap as every other party. So around last year...
Do you think they were trying to kind of use you then as maybe like a...
I was the total working class guy. I've been very open. I was the total working class guy. I was the stick Thomas Kerr on because he looks and sounds like the vast majority of Central Belt, but we're going to take him to campaign in other areas. That was what happened to me inside the Tory party. And don't get me wrong,
didn't allow you to kind of concentrate on your own kind of...
I couldn't do what I wanted to do and speak about the issues I wanted to speak about in the Tory party. Near the end of it, and don't get me wrong, as I say, I had huge opportunities inside the Tory party. There's still people that I count as really, really close friends inside the party. They might not consider me as a close pal anymore, but I do still consider them as loads of them as close friends. So I got huge opportunities for the Tory party, but near the end, I wasn't able to go and campaign and do the stuff I really wanted to focus on.
You need to be true to yourself,
and that was the breaking point for me with Reform came last year after the general election. I had kind of decided I was leaving the Scottish Tories. There was the leadership contest. I supported Megan Gallagher, who's a really close friend of mine, for the leadership. She didn't win. After that, I thought, this party's just no for me. They don't stand for it, and it's just vote for us to stop the SNP. We're against independence, but there's no positivity at all. And I was leaving politics entirely. I'd been offered a job to go and work in the private sector. I was going to sit as an independent for 2 years, leave politics and go and work away. And at Christmas time, I spoke to Shannon, my partner. I spoke to my gran, the two people who are the closest to me. And I told them what I was planning on doing, and they were like aghast at me because they were like, you spent 14 years building this up. You care so much about it. You can go and work in an office, you'll get bored. And I thought, it's probably make a good point. But it was where my mindset was at. But at Christmas, a really interesting thing happened everywhere I went. So whether it was in Ibrox, whether it was in the pubs, whether it was in restaurants, no matter where I went, everybody, because of who I'm, instinctively talked about politics, and everybody was talking about reform. Every single person was coming to me and saying, Farage gets it, reform's where you need to go, this is blah, blah, blah. And I thought, when I had spoke about maybe looking at reform had spoke to me last July, I thought, nah, it's not for me. And I thought, maybe I'm being too hasty. So I looked into them, watched a couple of the rallies, read the contract, and I watched, it was Lee Anderson's speech at their conference last year. And I sat there and I thought, my God, that's actually where I'm at. That's politically, that is me. These guys are going in there, ripping up the whole system, ripping up the status quo and saying, we need to start again, the country's broke. And it's not just about saying Scotland's great, the rest of the UK is bad, or the rest of the UK is great and Scotland's bad. No, the whole system is broke. And if you want to try and transform working class people, you need to rip that whole whole system apart. So I decided in January I was going to do it, and I reached out to Reform myself and spoke to people who I knew had already made that switch, spoke to them, and it all kind of just happened for there. And it was the best political decision I ever made, because if you'd seen me last November, we'd done this conversation last November, I was politically just homeless. I was shattered. I was done in. I just thought I was so scunnered with the whole system. I just thought this whole politics is so negative. It's no campaigning. It's no working for the people I care about. If you see me now, my political mojo's back. I'm passionate about what I'm doing. I like being out campaigning. I don't feel like I'm lying to constituents by saying vote for reform, because I do genuinely believe it. Last July, when I was talking to people saying vote Conservative, I was inside my head saying, I really don't want you to vote Conservative because they're all just as bad as each other. I feel like for the first time in a long time, I've been true to myself. It's been the best decision I've ever made.
No, and listen, I respect it. I mean, I'm not a reform man myself, and I'll tell you why. I think Nigel Farage, I think, to me, I just can't take to him in the way that I think he's really fake in the way that he comes across. This is only my take on him. I see him like he's jumped kind of. Put it this way, the thing he done with Tommy Robinson, I thought was. No, I'm not a Tommy Robinson fan. I'm not, but Tommy Robinson, I think, put him back on spotlight, and then he kind of dropped him very quickly. No, I get it. Politics is a ruthless game. It's a hard game. But I think I've seen Farage doing these things that many times, and then the Brexit thing as well. I think obviously lying, just saying we'll get this amount of money every week, and the kind of stuff that he says, and these figures never ever match with the reality of things. So I suppose I'm asking: is it more like Reform's party, or are you actually interested? Is it Farage that you're kind of...
Nigel as a person, I think, is one of the most remarkable politicians that we've seen in a long time, genuinely. And I get where you're coming from. I get why some people don't like him, because he is a Marmite person, but you need to be Marmite in politics if you're actually making a difference. If you're no Marmite in politics, if people don't dislike you, you're really not doing your job. Because the reality of politics is you need to be confrontational, you need to set your values up, you need to put them up, and some people like them, some people don't like them. So I get why people don't take to Nigel. I think he is one of the most remarkable politicians that we've seen in the past 20 odd years since Margaret Thatcher left us Downing Street.
What do you think he's done?
So when you look at the past 15, 20 years, Nigel Farage spoke about the same issues. So immigration, huge one. I remember when he used to go to the channel to stop the boats, and it was 2020 or something like that, and he was stoning at the English at the channel, and people used to look and say, this is just a wee sad, lonely person trying to... He was highlighting an issue that is now a massive, massive political issue. He, for the past 15 years, has spoke about the economics and how taxation is going to kill working class people who want to try and get a job and get a chance in life. He spoke about that for the past 10, 15 years. And it's now where all the mainstream parties are having to move to. So when you look through his record, and not just the rhetoric that comes around him, because of who he is, there is a lot of rhetoric that comes around him. But when you look at what he's actually said and what he's done in the past 10, 15 years, I think he's one of the people who, and it's why the public mood's changed so much on him, because I think they can look back to 2010, as early as 2010, and he was saying the same things that he still says now and was campaigning for the same things that he still campaigns for now. I think he's got a massive foresight as to what's going on in the country and how people actually feel. So I think he is a remarkable guy, but it's not just because of Nigel Am and Reform. It's because of the whole party. So Richard Tice, I think, is one of the most intellectual people I've ever met. I remember meeting Richard at a dinner he held in Glasgow a couple of months after I had joined the party, and he gave this 40-odd minute speech off the cuff, no notes whatsoever, about net zero, scrapping it, how it's going to work in the North East, how we try and employ people, what taxation means. I'd been a Tory for 14 years and I'd never heard somebody lay out so clearly, without a scripted note, what the economy matters, how you get people back into work and why it's really, really important for working class communities. So it's not just Nigel, the whole team behind him, Lee Anderson, Sarah Poachin, these are people who really know what they're talking about. And then you look at the ethos behind Reform. So the reason I went to Reform, immigration is a big issue that I care about. But the reason I went was the economic argument. This idea that you take the taxation, when you start paying income tax for £12,500 up to £20,000, it'd be transformational for so many people that I know in the East End of Glasgow. So many young guys who are white van man, working away, doing self-employed, all this sort of stuff, who are hammered right now by taxation in Scotland. If you raise that tax threshold, transformational for them. And I think that sort of stuff is why I went to Reform. So I get the noise that comes with it. It's always going to exist with Nigel just because of who Nigel is. But I do think he's one of the most remarkable politicians that we will see.
I think, I genuinely think he's going to probably win the next general election. I think there's a good chance of that. But to me, again, I'll set out where I kind of stand politically, Thomas, and it's always I think we need a strong social welfare system. I think we need a good NHS, a good strong NHS. I think we need good institutions, whether it be the judicial system, whether it be the prison system, whether it be the police, whether it be hanging. And I think privatising everything, I don't think that works.
It doesn't, but that's another one of these noises that come around Reform that actually, when you look at the policy, isn't accurate. What they do when it comes to the NHS, perfect example, right? They take a comment that Nigel made in 2011, I think it was, or 2012, out of context and use that clip to say he wanted to privatise the NHS. He didn't say that. What he said is that as we move forward, you're going to have to look at an insurance-based sort of system of how it would work, right? Now, he wasn't saying that's what he wanted. He's saying that's how this country was going to play out. Now, when you look at how the NHS has worked for the past 20-odd years, you now have adverts on STV advertising private health insurance. I know working class people who are pals with my gran, who have used their whole life savings to get hip replacement privately because they can't get it on the NHS. So what Nigel was saying was that unless you fix the issues that exist inside the NHS, you were going to have to move to that sort of insurance-based system. What Reform's actual policy is in the NHS is that it will always be free at the point of need. It will always be there for people who need to use it. If you can afford to go private, then absolutely we can try and help you to do that, because that then frees up waiting lists in the NHS that then supports people who can't afford it. So it's not about trying to say we want to privatise the NHS, it's about trying to reform the NHS to make it work, because right now every politician would say it doesn't work. So it's that sort of thing that it's taking out of context. All the stuff that you mentioned there, I agree with. I want a strong welfare system. Both my parents were drug addicts. I've seen how welfare can really benefit people, but I've seen how it doesn't benefit people as well. So you do want a strong welfare system. If you want to fix the issue with welfare reforms, this is where Labour got it wrong in the past couple of months. You don't just tackle welfare cuts, which is what they were doing. You transform the system to make work pay. Because if you want to encourage people back into work, you make work pay. So that's what that tax threshold matters so much. It's why skills and apprenticeships need to be massively more important in Scottish education and academia is, because we don't focus on that. So you need to do that to get kids educated properly, to then be able to go into the workplace, to then be able to make work pay. In our system, then it doesn't. So no wonder we have so many young people sitting on welfare. So it is about having that strong welfare system, but it's there to support people that need it, rather than it's just there as a lifestyle, which I think loads of people do see. So I agree with everything that you've just said, but the noise that comes around reform makes it sound as if we don't. And I think that's going to be the really interesting thing about politics over the next few years, is I think the old arguments are left versus right are tossed out the window. I think it's now between right versus wrong.
I agree. I don't think the old left and right wing. I think, but this is, I was kind of saying this to Craig Houston as well, because he's kind of similar in this, but So see, like, obviously you've stayed in Cranhill, right?
Yeah.
So you know that there's people there that aren't going to get a job, are never going to work. And there's people there that all over Glasgow, because of poverty and just because of the lifestyle choices they've made, aren't ever going to work. Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't have things where people can have the opportunity to go and work if they want, but there is loads of people that can't work and nobody would employ them. Do you know what I mean? So what would... I seen kind of something that was like a 2-job offer, that kind of thing, and then you would be looking at maybe scrapping the benefits for people. I think that's very dangerous. That's only my opinion. I think, like, for somebody who we have let down so much in poverty, to me is not going to go away anytime soon. And unless you're close to eradicating poverty, I think bringing in policies like that's very dangerous. So,
and as you say, so that's the difference though, is that there's plenty of people in Cranhill that I knew. There's plenty of people across this city that know who can't work, right? Who just physically can't work because of disability, because of kids, because of how there's loads of different reasons as to why people can't work, and that's absolutely fine. So they people would be protected on the welfare system. What we're saying is that there is a huge swathe of people, though, particularly young people since the pandemic, who have been stuck on welfare. And it's no by their choice. Right? I don't buy into this idea that some people do, even in my own party, that people like to sit back in their backsides and watch the telly all day. I don't buy that, right? And there's nobody that I've met that's where their lifestyle wants to be. The difference, though, is that work at the moment don't pay. So why would you, if you're a young guy who's grew up in a household of poverty, who's grew up in a household of addiction, you've seen your mum, your dad, probably your gran and granda stuck on welfare, why would you not fall into that same trap rather than go and get a job? If when you go and get a job, you're going to get taxed like mad and you're not making as much money as you would sitting back anyway.
Yeah.
So the point is you try and fix that. So that's where reforms come in and said, you're right, we would offer you 2 jobs. If you didn't get 2 jobs, you would be sanctioned. You wouldn't get your welfare taken off, you'd be sanctioned properly. But that goes back to the bigger issue about trying to transform the education system in particular. It's something that you'll see when we're putting forward a manifesto next year for Holyrood around skills and apprenticeships, because all the young guys, there's so many young people who
is
have
there
so
an
much.
Is there an age limit? Like, because obviously there'll be a lot of guys that maybe like above 30, 40 who are now looking at apprenticeships who would be in benefits.
You could train them, So there's so many people I know. One of the people who, she'll hate me saying this, by the way, because I'll get her out of trouble for her own party. But a friend of mine is a Labour MP, right? Maureen Buck, who represents Glasgow North East. Lovely woman. Disagree with politics massively. Lovely woman. She is an MP for Glasgow North East. She was a councillor for 15 years, I think. Now, before that, she worked in a tie factory. When she was in her 40s, she decided she didn't want to do that anymore and went to college, studied an admin sort of role, and now is a member of Parliament for Glasgow North East. That's part of the social mobility system that I'd want to see exist.
Amazing,
so
Thomas.
I think what you need to have for the people who are in their 40s, 50s, who've lost their jobs, who've stuck in the past because the work that they used to do isn't there, you need to train them up properly. So it's about trying to offer that there for people. So I think there's a whole system shake-up that needs to exist, and this is part of the reason I'm in the party I'm in, because I don't think any other party talks about this. They talk about tweaking it. It's all about tweaking little things around the side and then blaming everybody else. So, you know, if you're Scottish Labour, we'll bring in more apprenticeships. Don't say how they're going to do it, but we're going to do it because the SNP's cut all your apprenticeships. Or if you're the SNP, I will look at Labour. If you're the Tories, it's just vote for us to stop independence.
You spoke about like looking at outputs rather than inputs, and it was interesting the way she said it. It's like it's dead easy for a politician to come up and say, like, with inputs, we're going to put X amount of police on the streets. We're going to, but it's the outputs on it. How did it work out? Do you know what I mean?
And I think that's where politics. I'm hopeful right at the next year that what we can do in Scottish politics is get to a grown up place where we can start talking about issue based, and you can start judging people on the record properly, not just about sound bites. And I can't vote with the SNP because the SNP support independence and I hate them on everything, and I don't like Labour because they're socialists. No, if there's a policy issue that you can then work together across party, you should, to try and help transform young people's lives, because all the young people who are sitting across the whole system right across central Scotland, it's not just in Glasgow, right across the central belt, who have been let down by the system. Their parents were let down by the exact same systems, and it's up to us as politicians to fix that. If we don't fix that, then we're going to be sitting here in 20 years' time still having the exact same conversations with the exact same people saying the exact same things. I want to try and transform it, and I think that's the only part of it is speaking about it properly in Scottish politics is reform.
So like, obviously inequality is probably like at its all time. Like, I don't even know. Like, when we obviously speak about the like top 1% having 99% of the world's wealth and stuff like that, and again, Big Craig Houston was talking about billionaires and stuff like that and how he wouldn't tax them. And I think Reform's kind of similar to that. Like, you would rather
Slightly.
have them invest
Yeah.
and stuff like that. But my argument to that is they've already been doing that for years. So like with billionaires have always they've been about for so long. They don't pay tax anyway.
Yeah.
They just do what they want. So how would Reform, I suppose, and how would it kind of benefit Glasgow if people were going out, and how would it benefit Glasgow that what would Reform be doing on that?
So you're slightly right. It's not about trying to give the rich more money. It's about understanding that the way that the global world works, you tax rich people to the hill. They'll move their tax somewhere else that they can get it smaller. That's always happened.
They're already on
But
offshore accounts.
But that's what I'm saying. So that already happens. So see if you start raising them up, what you're probably going to do is the people who are still investing in the country are going to do the exact same thing. So you're not actually getting the money. And I always disagree with left-wing politicians on this argument because I just don't think that the economics make sense because these people are so much.
So say like you taxed a billionaire and they went, do you know what, you're taxing me too much, I'm off, I'm going to take my business elsewhere. Do you think a millionaire would step in there, or like somebody?
They could, but then what you end up having is a system where the people who are investing in the country. I don't want investors to leave Scotland. I don't want investors to leave Britain. I
think we should get rid of the people.
I disagree with that because the investors are the ones. So when you look at the housing crisis we're facing, the investors are the ones who are going to build the homes. And by the way, seeing we're building the homes, all the jobs that are in that building site are young people that I'm talking about who are the apprenticeships. So it's about trying to find a system that's fairer. So Reform's policy on this is twofold, right? So that we had an Amazon tax in our manifesto last year, the contract last year, which was that for these big super global companies, there should be a higher tax for them to have to pay in, and that money would then get put into the high streets. So that's something that the media didn't talk about because they like kidding this idea that Nigel's all for the rich. Well, there's one policy that wasn't. He wanted to go after the big super
so
rich.
Was that?
So it was an Amazon tax, and I can't remember the exact detail off the top of my head, but it was something along the lines
of... Is that something he's going to be putting in the manifesto?
Yeah, so it was in the contract last year for the general election, and I suspect it will continue on for the next 5 years. And what it was basically, if you're a big global company, then you should be taxed, and that money would then be invested into high streets, because obviously we've seen the difference in retail. So that's one policy there. The other one that they've spoke about in the past couple of months is the Britannia card. And what that is that since Labour's brought the changes into the non-dom system, which I slightly agree with, but I kind of at the same point don't have this. I have the old argument of the people are now just pulling away. So the amount of investors that have left this country since Labour's come into power is huge. And all that money was all creating economic growth that then creates the prosperity that we need to then be able to fund public services. So what Reform said is we'd have a card system that you want to invest in the country, you buy your Britannica card, you would get tax dividends absolutely when you come into the country, but you need to pay them up front free in order to get this money. That money will then be invested in to try and make sure that you cut the tax threshold for people who are on the poorest. So there's a system there that you can do it properly where you're no clobbering people who are absolutely loaded, because I always want to stay in a system where work pays. Now, work pay should be at the very bottom, but it should also be at the top. If you're working 7 hours a week and you're a CEO of a major corporation, then you should be getting the money that you're getting, but you should be paying your fair share. You should be paying your fair share.
Do you think you should have like £500 billion in the bank?
Well, if people have worked to get that, then fine. But what I'm saying is it depends on where they're taxing that and where they're investing that. And the people who are up there, they're the investors. They're the people who...
I don't think people work hard to get... I mean, you obviously clearly do. Look at take Elon Musk, right, for example, right? He's on trajectory to be a trillionaire.
Yeah.
What do you need that for?
Well, but then look at the amount of investment that Elon Musk has made over the years into different companies to try and build up to where he is, and look at the amount of money he puts. So there is an argument as to the companies that he has built up then employ loads, thousands, millions of people across the globe.
He's known for like dodging taxes.
But that's the old argument about the rich. This is where I disagree with people on the left, because the problem is that these people are always going to do that, no matter how you fix up your system, because somewhere else in the world, somebody realises that we cut taxes for the people, they invest their money here, and see that money that then creates prosperity for our people.
But it's already been done, if you know. It's like,
no, I get that argument, but what I'm saying is that even if we tax them even more, then you're going to just pull people away even further. That's the point I'm making, is that my argument has always been that those people that are the richest. Now, Elon Musk is probably a slightly different. I'm looking at people like, Sir Tom Hunter, right, who's a millionaire.
Yeah.
Or you look at somebody like Alan Sugar, who's a millionaire, right? When you start taxing the people massively, they will move their money away. But what they also won't do is they won't invest in our country. So when you look at Scotland, the amount of investors, the amount of massive businesses that's invested in the country the past 17 years for the SNP is massively diminished. And what that then does is you create a housing crisis, because the millionaires are the ones who build the houses that people then get to stay in, but it also gets the jobs. They're the ones who invest in businesses to then try and get people started up. They're the ones who invest in the apprenticeships that I'm talking about, to get people started off in hospitality or however it is they want to go about it. These are the people that then start the investments and then get people that chance to get up the ladder, that then put more in. And the biggest point that I always think that people forget about this is that the people who pay tax, the investors that they're there, then create economic growth. And that economic growth then goes to the country's coffers. And that means that we can then fund the NHS. That means we can then make sure there's a good welfare system, make sure there's a good education system. The more investors you have, the more money that there is, the more growth that there is in the economy, you then have that more money there that you don't have to cut. Because we've got into this position.
I understand
we've got to this position in Scottish politics in particular is really bad for it. UK's is slightly different, but Scottish politics is really bad for it, where we are constantly tax and spend.
What have we got? 4 billionaires? I think there's 450 billionaires in the UK. I think Scotland's got 4, maybe. 4. I think 4. But to me, if you have got that type of wealth, and when I'm talking about super wealth. I'm not talking about like if you're a hard-working millionaire that's done really well and you're a millionaire, like then you should just be paying your fair taxes the same as anybody else. But once you reach that threshold when you're a billionaire, because I've done this the other day, people kind of don't see the difference. I mean, this is somebody put it into perspective to me. So how many seconds do you think are a million seconds? How many days? 13, right? No. 13 days. How many days do you think a billion seconds is? 31 years.
Right.
So it shows the difference, right?
Yeah.
So see when you hit that and you're a billionaire, you've made your money because working class people have been building your cars, whatever it is, right? So you've used the working class to get to where you are. So once you hit that stage, I think you should have a responsibility to go back to society and go, do you know what? I'll pay a 2% tax.
Yeah. And I don't disagree with that. What I'm saying is that the amount of people, so you said there, right, 4 billionaires in Scotland, so you tax the 4 billionaires more than you would anywhere else. What are the 4 billionaires going to do? They're either going to stay in Scotland because they care about the country, or they're going to disappear and put their money somewhere else. And the 4 billionaires still...
Their money does go into the country?
No, well, it does, because every single penny... Because they still do pay tax. Remember...
Of course they pay tax,
right now, remember taxes in the UK are at a 70-year high, right? They are the highest it's ever been since, I think, after, the 1950s in the whole UK, right? So taxes are already massively high in the UK, and the millionaires that you're talking about, the people who've worked hard to get it, they are massively impacted by that. So the billionaires probably aren't they? But the more you increase tax, the millionaires end up
I
coming
get it for the millionaires, the working class millionaires.
So there's that point, and then when you think about Scotland pays even more tax than what the rest of the UK does. So we're even higher than the rest of the UK because of the system that the SNP's brought in that I don't think is fair. So I get the point about let's target the people who are the super rich. I've already said about the Amazon sort of thing that we spoke about. But these guys have that much money that, see, no matter what we do, they will just start shifting their money around. That's just how the system works. It's no fair. I'm not saying it is, but that's how it's been set up.
So with great wealth, then they become above the system a wee bit.
Slightly. That's why I think the reform's needed, because not just reform. If you look across the whole of Europe, there's populist parties on the right who are trying to fix this problem themselves. Yep. So reform's policies are slightly different when it comes to those super rich, as I've already mentioned. But what I think is wrong is that taxation as a whole becomes a whole conversation. So we don't just talk about the super wealthy. In Scotland, if you are a nurse, if you're a teacher, if you're a head teacher, if you're a doctor, you pay more tax than you would the rest of the UK.
I don't agree with that.
So, but that's because we get into this conversation about taxation, because people like to paint it as you raise taxes on the rich, we're targeting the rich. What actually happens is that all the other people then fall into that same bracket. We have a massive GP shortage in Scotland. We have a massive
wealth tax.
There is, but to politicians, they don't see that difference, because they look at it as let's raise taxes. They don't look at it to try and make sure we get economic growth. And my argument is, if you cut taxes on people, yes, the people at the very top would probably benefit for that. But you also then impact all the other millionaires, all the other people who are working in the public services and higher up places. You then impact all of them. All the people then start buying stuff because they've got more money. All that stuff then goes into economic growth. All that growth then goes into the economy. The economy then pays for us to get good public services. So that's where I sit politically on it. And I get the argument. At
Libya, right? If you look at the way Libya was running with Gaddafi, right? Now you can have your whatever you say about Gaddafi and stuff like that, but the people loved him. And if you look at the way his country ran, it was... every single person got a wage no matter what, like a good wage, a good working wage, and even if
And the super rich got even more, but including Gaddafi.
of course
That's the problem.
Gaddafi was
That's the problem,
very
is
wealthy.
that these countries that do this sort of thing where working people do get a salary that helps them, there is still so much corruption in the top that you're not dealing with the super wealthy as we would be speaking about, because what they're getting is they're getting the vast majority of that money, and it ends up becoming a whole corrupt system. And there's people at the bottom still get a wee.
I think that's what we've got here anyway.
That's like a wee handout, but I think that is so patronising to
You
try and
can't
say
say Elon Musk and that, and George Soros and Bill Gates and these people are fair.
No, but that's what I'm saying. But the system that they're working in is the system that's there globally, right? And I'm a Scottish councillor, right? Still
No,
to try.
I get the point.
I get the point.
Reform are kind of.
I get the point that you're making, but what I'm saying is that Reform's policy on all this throughout the whole UK has always been that when you start going after the people at the very top, you then accidentally start bringing people who shouldn't be there, been impacted by that as well. And I'm always of the case that they people are investors into your country. They're the entrepreneurs who then create the system for us to be able to grow up. All the kids that I'm talking about at the start, who I've seen in Cranhill, those investors, they're the ones that then, as I said, build the houses or invest in the jobs or the restaurants, whatever it might be, that give them the chance to get up that ladder. I think that the system should be fairer to make sure that they people can keep more of their money. And I think the difference between me and any of the parties in Holyrood at the moment is, my viewpoint is that I want taxes cut for them at the lowest, but I don't mind it being cut at the top as well, because I'd rather the taxes were cut as a whole, because I think that people individually are better to spend their own money than anybody else. And I do genuinely believe that they people, even the Elon Musks of the world, would invest that money in. And I think you've seen that for people like Elon Musk, Bill Gates, other people who invest their money into some places. Now, I disagree with Elon Musk's political views. I massively disagree with Bill Gates on loads of different issues. That's a whole different podcast we could have on Bill Gates.
He's not a nice man.
But when you look at where they put their money, there's a difference. So I get the point. But I think that people argue that my party, right, is a populist party that says what it is and the numbers don't add up. The numbers never add up on the left on this. And where you look at whatever country in the world that has tried to do this, France, for example, when Francois Hollande was president, brought in this big tax to hit the big super wealthy. We're going after them because it's a good soundbite. It sounds good. You know, the big rich should pay their fair share and you'll get more of that money. What happens is they then shift all their money away. And what people then lose that.
And I know it's obviously, there's absolutely nothing you can do with this, Thomas. It's not like I'm getting a dig at you at all. But I think as a whole, as a nation, we need to, as you say, it's the old left and right wing things gone, right? And we're going back to this nationalist thing, right? So there's people like, quite rightly so, if they believe in nationalism, that's fine. But what you then do is go, oh, Scotland will attract all the billionaires, right? And then what happens is nothing will change. I can guarantee you, nothing will change. They'll invest the same money that they're investing, they'll dodge the same taxes. So people get fed up, and then Labour come back in and go, oh, we're going to tax you, and they might jump a country again. What I'm saying is there should be somewhere, like you do have like the World Economic Forum, and you do have these places where you could call it, and this, again, it's nothing but Nigel Farage is in a position, if he gets to where he is, where he could say, well, no, we want to make decisions globally and we want to go here. I just don't think that we're ever going to get anywhere when these people are able to kind of manoeuvre the way they manoeuvre.
I get the argument. I get exactly what you're saying. I disagree with the place you get to with that, because my viewpoint is that these people who are worth billions or millions or however much it might be, when you've got that much money, you will invest that money. I've always believed that because you've got that much money, of course you would, because you want to double up your profit. So they want to invest. So I genuinely do believe that if you were to cut tax in Scotland, a lot of the people who are investors would come into Scotland to invest, because why would you know? We're a great country. We've got massive resources. There's a huge place that you could invest into. So I think they would invest. So I think we disagree in where you get to. I agree that there is a huge, super wealthy that exists globally, that something has to be done to try and make sure that they start paying their fair share in tax. Again, as I said last year in the contract, Reform had some sort of policy around that, and obviously it was before I was involved in the party, but that was there, and I suspect there will be other stuff.
That's interesting, because I've never seen that. I've never
because our opponents don't like talking about the good stuff. They just like talking about the bad.
I will look into that, Thomas.
But that's the point, is that sort of thing does exist, but that's a global issue, right? And it's something that's going to be a big impact for the world. My viewpoint has always been, though, that if you cut taxes, whether that be in working people at the lowest, whether that be people in the middle, whether it be higher, whether it be super higher, whatever way you want to try and bracket people, when you cut taxes, they people will then start spending that money. The super wealthy will start investing. So they'll start investing in house building, they'll start investing in job creation, they'll start investing in private entrepreneurs and restaurants, all this sort of stuff. So they'll start doing that. That then gives the people that I'm talking about, the very lowest, a chance to get jobs, to get on the market, to make sure they're working. When you cut their taxes, they then spend their money. They're spending their money in the pubs, they're spending their money in the shops, they're spending their money in the economy. That then creates economic growth, and that economic growth then pays for the public services we enjoy. If you don't cut taxes, what you end up doing is you have Scotland existing the way it is, which is we're stagnated. So loads of people can't afford to go out. Loads of people can't afford to enjoy their lives. So what you're doing is they're paying higher taxes. They then can't afford to then put money into the economy. So the economy then starts to shrink and it starts to then stagnate, which is what's happened. Politicians in Holyrood or in Westminster then look at it and say, oh God, right, we've not got this money. What do we need to do? Well, we need to go and cut. So where do they cut? Well, they cut welfare, they cut the lowest paid, because it doesn't really matter about them. So they then do that, and then they say, but we're also going to tax the rich. And as I said, those super wealthy guys move their taxes away somewhere else. And what actually happens is that the people in the higher brackets then fall into the higher tax.
We at a point, obviously I'm no clued up in this to that extent, Thomas, but were we at a point before where we were receiving a lot more money in the pot from millionaires?
So the past 17 years of this SNP government, I would argue anyway, they would argue different. If you had an SNP politician sitting where I'm sitting, they would argue their point of view. But my viewpoint has always been, and the facts back this up, when you look at investors, when you look at house builders, when you look at all the different places that we had, the past 17 years of this SNP government has been disastrous for us. Now, the first 5, maybe 10 years under Alex Salmond, he courted these sort of people. He made sure that the Tom Hunters and other people felt as if they were investing. Nicola Sturgeon's government weren't interested in business at all. They weren't interested in private entrepreneurs. They weren't interested in cutting tax. That's when taxes started to really increase in Scotland. And as I say, what ends up happening is when you say you're going to tax the rich, what ends up happening is that the big super rich move their money away. And
so
what ends up happening,
they were
paying tax in Scotland, and what happened is they've shifted their money elsewhere. And then the people in those middle brackets then fall in. So they're paying more tax. And then what happens, by the way, is that you have a system where we've got a GP shortage in Scotland. Because see, if you're studying right now, if you're a young person studying medicine, right, you get your degree, you become a doctor. What are you going to do? Stay in Scotland where you're paying more tax, or do you move south of the border where you're paying less tax? So there's that argument. So I think that Scottish politics needs to have a grown-up debate about this. And by the way, I'm not saying it's not a legitimate conversation at the left, and John Swinney and other people will have, which is they believe that we raise taxes because you have a social contract. I get that argument, I understand it. I just fundamentally disagree with it passionately. I just don't think that that's the vision that Scotland needs.
I think in the past, you're allowed that. This is the what we're talking about. Is you're allowed to have healthy debate about, and we've lost that.
That's what annoys me the most about politics. When I joined Reform, I was branded everything under the sun, right? I was already called everything under the sun anyways, a Tory, so part of a dog's back to me. But I was called everything under the sun, fine. What made me, and I mean really, really angry, was that summit that John Swinney held. See the anti-far right summit, the Stop Reform summit. That pissed me right off for one reason and one reason only, which is you lose the democratic argument if you're trying to shut down your opponents, right? John Swinney is entitled to have his left-wing views. As I said, I understand them. I fundamentally disagree with everything he stands for, but I get why he's there. I would like to think that as First Minister of Scotland, he would understand where my point of view is as well, and why I'm to the right.
I wouldn't even see him as left-wing, man. You know, that way, like, I just...
But that's where politics is, and that angered me when they all sat in that building across George Square. All of them all sitting there, Anna Salwa, John Swinney, Alex Cole-Hamilton. The only people that didn't turn up was the Tories. But everybody else was all there lecturing the public. How dare you even think about voting reform? That is the epitome of just the establishment no understanding what's going on in working class communities. I have argued for a long time that there's two visions for Scotland, right? There's the higher tax, higher spend sort of vision that the SNP and Labour want to promote. It's fine. Politically, that's fine. I disagree with them, but it's fine. And then there's the vision I stand for, which is lower taxes, more entrepreneurs, supporting business, trying to get investment into Scotland. That's where I sit politically. I suspect there's vast amounts of people inside the SNP that agree with the values and the stuff that I said. Dare I say the Deputy First Minister probably agrees more with my sort of vision as than what Nicola Sturgeon's vision is. And I think that we need to get to a politics stage in Scottish politics where you can start debating the issues. And I think the problem and why I've ended up in Reform is we lost that. We lost that entire debate. It became a ruin. The SNP support independence. The Tories were against independence. Labour were somewhere in the middle. and we just all fought each other. So, vote SNP because we'll stop Blair and stop the Tories. Vote Labour because we'll stop the SNP and stop the Tories, and vote Tory because we'll stop the SNP.
No, I agree
There's
with
no
that.
positivity, and that's the two visions that I think need to compete in Scottish politics, and we need to get back to talking about the issues. And as I say, I can respect John Swinney's political views while vehemently disagreeing with every single thing that the man stands for. That's where I sit politically. What annoys me is I don't think that he respects my views. I think that he looks at me as somebody who's this wee far-right guy sitting here and I don't like that politics, so I'm going to shut him up. No, but let's debate about policy. Let's talk about the issues that matter. If you think your policies are so good, take them to the country, start debating about the policies, and let's see who's going to win, because I'm pretty confident that my argument would go up in the scales, but instead they use these Scottish scare tactics by brandishing we stand for the super welfare, we want to privatise the NHS, all the stuff that actually isn't really true, but it just benefits them to say politically.
No,
Sorry, you got me ranting there.
No, listen. It's
I've been holding that one in for a while.
No, it's interesting, and I think it's obviously like I'm always going to be. I'm never going to say like I'm always going to be of that view. Billionaires tax them. Like, I think when you reach that threshold of that, but again, we've had that debate. So we'll kind of move on to another thing that kind of interests me is your drug policies, because I was actually kind of really kind of taking like positively with that. Some of the things that you've looked at and called out and stuff like that. And so what would you do as a kind of reform councillor, and what you're trying to do at the moment for drugs policies?
So the biggest, obviously I've got a passion on this because of my background. The biggest scandal, I think, of the past 10 years in Scottish politics is the drug death numbers.
Yeah.
I think it is horrific. And I think the cavalier way that Nicola Sturgeon at the last leaders' debate said, I took my eye off the ball, I thought it was shameful. I really, really did.
That's shocking.
Because I remember, and I don't like talking about this because it does get to me, but I remember when Nicola Sturgeon was Deputy First Minister just before my dad passed away, she cut alcohol and drug partnership funding. And she was warned, the government came out in a paper afterwards that said she was warned that in the risk register, you could result in a rise of drug deaths in this. She's still done it, still made that cut, because it was an easy cut, because at the end of the day, drug addicts and alcoholics don't vote, do they? So it doesn't really matter about them. Let's keep with prescription charges though, because the middle class vote. So what ended up happening was she cut the funding that supported people, and you had this huge spike in drug deaths. And then it became this sort of political football, which really, really, really angered me. And by the way, my former party was just as bad for this. I had loads of fights inside my former party privately about this, in particular in the safe consumption facility. So my view in politics has always been that you need to give people support. As I said, I had two parents who were drug addicts. One sadly no longer here. One still is. The reason that my mum's still here is because of rehab. I think rehab works. Yes. I really, really do think that rehab works. I don't believe that just managing somebody's addiction is good enough, and I think that that's where we've got to in politics. The methadone program, the safe consumption facility, these are about trying to manage people's addictions rather than actually supporting people to get after addiction and try to give them hope in life again. So my view has always been that you need to fund rehabs better. That's why the Right to Recovery Bill that Anne-Marie Ward has brought forward, I think would be transformational in Scottish, and I think it's a big
I love Anne-Marie. I think
Anne-Marie's one of the most inspirational people I've ever met. I've got to know her really, really well when I've got into politics through the Tories and everyone else, and I think she is fantastic. She's the sort of person that you need in politics to be able to shake people up. So I think she's brilliant. And that bill that she brought forward, and the Tories took it on, but it wasn't the Tories bill, it wasn't Douglas Ross's bill. Anne-Marie in Favour UK and people who supported them wrote that bill, and Douglas then used his mechanism to take that forward in Parliament. The fact that that's not even been debated properly,
I know.
The fact that they're trying to talk it out so it probably won't be debated this side of Parliament says a lot about where the SNP are in this political issue. So Reform's policy is that we fully support that Right to Recovery Bill. If there's Reform MSPs elected next year, we'll work with whoever it is inside that Parliament. I think Labour have said that they're supportive of it. I think the Tories have said they. So somebody else can take that bill on to make sure that that gets passed, because if you want to tackle Scotland's drug death crisis, you have to start investing properly in addiction services to make sure that they're given the support. It's also where it fits into the taxation point I was talking about in the skills and apprenticeships, because if you want to transform the people at the very beginning and transform poverty to stop people falling into the trap of addiction, you need to start investing properly in people at a young age. And we don't do that in this country. 100%. The whole system is geared in Scotland towards academia. It's, free tuition fees. While we're scrapping and cutting back in apprenticeships and skills support. It's crazy, because there's so many young people who, like me, I never went to university. I never wanted to go to university. Never had an interest in going to university. I wanted to get to work because I wanted to start my career properly and I wanted to start my life properly. So many young people like that as well who never got that opportunity in life, and I think you have to transform that. So there's two edges of this. You need to solve the addiction issue that exists now, and my argument's always been that it has to be through rehab and recovery. But you then have to start investing in people really, really early on to make sure you tackle that subject at the very bottom. The other thing that really annoys me about politics, it's not actually politics, it's society now, is the sort of cavalier way that drugs is talked about. It's normalised in our politics.
Especially cocaine.
I was going to say cocaine is normalised in a way that I've never seen before. You go to a pub now, it's just normal that somebody would be getting up to go to the toilet and you know what they're doing. That to me is crazy.
I think I mean, some of the things you see, like people like I'm sure somebody was saying that their MAGA offered a line not that long ago, and it was like 65, and she was still, I think she was a bit half-fronted with it. But I think
it has become just so normal. But see
I think it's across the whole board. But
well, this is the thing. I mean, yes, you're touching a whole different subject, because what annoys me is the way that the middle class treat this subject to working class people. You know, they like coming. I used to always talk about the social worker sort of sector that used to come into Shettleston and lecture people like my parents or other people who were on addiction how you have to fix your life out. Well, they then went to their middle class dinner parties at the weekend and were snorting a bit of cocaine. You know, that sort of that attitude is shocking. I can't stand that, but I do think there has to be a societal outreach to talk about drugs in a different way. So where I slightly think that I was supportive of the drug consumption facility being opened up in Glasgow, I backed that only because I knew it when they work. Right, the only reason I supported that was because the SNP used it is a wedge issue between them and the UK government to say we're no in funding rehabs, because if we just had the safe consumption facility, then that would be solved. And that was what their argument was. And I always said inside the Tory party, give them it. Let them have their safe consumption facility, because it will not touch the drug deaths crisis. It will not touch people who are in addiction. Also, what that's going to do is manage people's addiction. All that's going to do is create issues around where that facility is going to be. So let them have it, and let them have to hold up their hands and say, we got this wrong. And that's exactly what's happened with the safe consumption facility. And what's actually happened is you've normalised drugs. So by basically saying to people, we're not going to arrest you, we're not going to charge you, we're not going to do this or that if you start taking drugs casually. So I'm not talking about people with addiction, I'm talking about people who are just in pubs. You've normalised it, so people then become just, well, no, there's no consequence to me doing this. I just think this is just normal. There has to be a total societal change in how we speak about drugs, because it isn't normal to be sniffing cocaine along with your pint on a Saturday night. It shouldn't be normalised. It should be punished as something that's no where you want to go. It's a different argument when it comes to cannabis. That's a whole different argument. But when it comes to severe drugs that can have huge impacts on people,
class A, man, and if you put a wee bit of like whatever and turn it into crack, do you know what I mean? It becomes a very, very different drug. Do you know what I mean?
And you then start people that then can't control their addiction, and it becomes a huge issue. So I think there has to be a whole societal change in how we speak about drugs, and I don't think we've got there.
Trends as well, like. I don't think that keeping up with the drug trends is a huge problem, in the way that the Taliban shut off the kind of two main routes to the opium kind of trade. So we're starting to see more and more synthetic opioids like fentanyl and nitazines and stuff like that, which are horrible drugs. But they're also getting found in the cocaine supply. They're getting found in the street Valium and stuff like that. And I don't think like obviously there's to me the biggest problem's trauma, right? Most people are in addiction because they're traumatized, right? The vast majority anyway. Now, as an somebody that's what's an addiction, there's nowhere for me to send somebody with trauma. It's mad. Like, there's nowhere for me. There's no centre that they can go and like work and go and like look
we've got to do it mental health services in this country massively,
and they won't work with addiction services. Addiction services won't work with mental health.
It's all back to front.
You're all trying to.
So what you have is a system where the addiction services are here, the health services there, the mental health services are here, and none of them speak to each other. No. So they're all separate. Definitely. So you don't have I mean, the safe consumption.
My pal, sorry to bang in, right? My pal was doing a PhD, right, and he phoned me and he says, Sean, you'll be perfect for this. He went, he's doing it about the drug deaths in prison, right? He says, going to give me some names of some mental health workers that you work with and some nurses that you work with. And I said, mate, I've been working there for like 4 years and I couldn't even tell you a name of any of the people. Like genuinely,
Aye.
like we don't talk to them. Like you make a referral and through paperwork
Aye,
and
that's
stuff.
it. But it's so separate. And I mean, when you take the safe consumption facility, it's so back to front as well. So when you go into the safe consumption, I couldn't believe this when they told me you go into it to take drugs. They give you your safe needles, whatever else that you need to do. You go and take the drugs, and then they offer you support afterwards.
Do you know they're actually giving people drugs now?
Well, that's it.
Like
Well,
real diamorphine.
I hadn't realised that was happening.
I think there's 23. Well, listen, I'm going to double check on this, but when I looked the last time, there was 23 people or something like that getting taxis and stuff like that done for diamorphine, getting real diamorphine.
It's crazy, and as I said, it's back to front.
I actually don't know whether to say this on the podcast because it's like you could put fucking hanging a seed in people's seed. Do you know what I mean?
No, I know what you
maybe
mean.
take that out, but I'll work on it.
But the problem with the safe consumption is it's back to front. When you go in to take something, they should be saying to you, "Can I give you support? Can I offer you assistance?"
Definitely.
If you don't want it and you want to go and take it, fine. But they don't. They do that back to front. So it ends up being when you've took your drugs, you're then offered, "Do you want support?" Well, you're not going to turn around when you've just took a line of coke or injected yourself with whatever you've injected yourself with, turn around and say, "I know you're going to give me support to then find out how I can manage this addiction." No, it's crazy. It's totally back to front. And my biggest argument against the safe consumption facility and why I said it wouldn't work is why, as I said, I backed it because I knew it wouldn't, is it would never have saved somebody like my dad's life.
No.
Would never. The idea that he would have left a house in Cranhill
I know.
and travelled into the
What we
city
done
centre to do
No.
crazy.
No,
And
no.
by the way, the other thing that you need to do to tackle this, and it's one of the biggest bugbearers I have in politics, is you need to go after people who are drug dealers. See those who deal drugs, I think they are the lowest of the low in society. They do not realise the impact that they have in working class communities. They don't realise the impact they have in families. They don't realise the impact that they have time after time after time when they give somebody a quick fix for what they see. They just see that as a customer, like you're buying a can of Red Bull for a shop. It's crazy to me, and we really have to get tougher on drug dealers in this country because we don't, and many of them know exactly what it is that they're doing, and it really, really gets to me because they don't realise the impact overall that then has in society.
I understand where you're coming from, and I think, listen, just with my background, I know people that are involved in these things, and I don't talk to these people anymore. But I would call some people that were involved in that friends, good friends, and some people looked after me in prison and stuff like that were maybe big drug dealers and stuff like that. And listen, I can't. The thing is with you, Thomas, I can't really argue because you've came from the same background as what I'm going to argue and what I'm going to debate and say. These guys didn't have a chance, right? You're kind of proof that you can do it, right?
And look, I get that there'll be people who'll be in that system who have got there by no fault. They might be through addiction themselves, but there is a vast majority of people. I remember them when I was a kid, going to the hussies with my mum when she was getting stuff or whatever else. And you used to see the faces because they were getting their money and they weren't caring about shutting that door and whoever it was that was there. That it really, really got to me. It really angered me.
Oh, I get that.
I get that I have an emotive reasons to why I'm so where I'm on it. I'm no objective on this at all because passionately I fundamentally just think that sort of system has to be totally ripped up and started again. It's something that I'm passionate about in politics.
Yeah.
And by the way, I've never done party politics on this. They try to in the city chambers all the time with me, and I never get into the party politics on it. I don't like doing the party politics on it. Doesn't mean I won't challenge Nicola Sturgeon on it because I think that she has a record that she has to be held accountable for. But by the way, so did the Tories. I've stood up in that chamber and I've called out Suella Braverman when she was Home Secretary. Every party has to start looking at this issue properly. Misuse of drug acts hasn't been reformed properly since the 1970s or 80s. I know. But every other bit of legislation we have to look at immediately. So
but you're not
there's
going
a
to get
huge
much
argument
to me with what you're saying, Thomas. You're making complete sense to me. I think the thing with the drug deals and stuff like that, I think what happens is unfortunately these guys pick a different route for you, right? For whatever reason, they might be abused or whatever, like physically, sexually, whatever. I don't know, but they then go into the care system, which isn't fit for purpose at this moment in time, and then that's just like a mini jail for a lot of them. And so what you do is you're creating the next generation of the prison system. So for me, I'm kind of like the way you're passionate about. I'm kind of passionate about.
No, and I get that.
I'll kind
and by the way, I think that there's the difference though that we're talking about people. So while I'm talking about drug dealers, You're talking about the people who are then supplying the drugs. So there's a difference between the young people who are stuck in care who then hand over the drugs to the people that are given them the drugs to then give away. There's a big difference. So
I don't know a big drug
younger
dealer that's
guys
no come through that
sort of system.
I genuinely don't. I couldn't tell you. Like, I'm just thinking of the people in my head that I know, that I don't know any that haven't went through that and in my eyes, I can either become addicted to drugs or I can sell them.
Yeah.
And then when they sell them, they become the baddie anyway. So a lot of them probably go, nobody cared about me when I was a wee guy, so why should I give a fuck?
Oh, I know. No, and I get
and
that.
I'm not trying to justify it because
I
understand, but I'll always defend it because I know some of these guys and I've heard some of the stories and it's horrific, some of the stuff they've been through. And to me, I don't think being hard on crime works. That's my opinion. And we'll go into this later, but I think with your drug stuff and that, I think you're not going to get much argument out of me with that. And I think I would stand with you on that, a lot of that. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
And I think that it's important that I think that most politicians probably would find it hard to disagree with me when it comes to that sort of drug stuff. And I think that the problem in our politics in Scotland goes back to what I was saying, is that we became so confrontational, that we hate different people in different parties because that's where they stand. Actually, I suspect there isn't much difference between me and John Swinney when it comes to the drug issue. So, politicians next year, whoever gets elected to Parliament, should all put their heads together and come up with a solution. Right. Because otherwise these numbers are just going to keep continuing. And even when you get a slight decrease, it makes me physically sick that ministers welcome it. There's been a welcome decrease in the number of people.
A decrease this
well, there definitely won't be. But that even that argument, we welcome a decrease in the number of people dying. Still over 1,000 people dying. When my dad passed away, there was 600 odd people that died with a drug-related death. That's still too many. So you don't ever welcome that there's a small decrease in the numbers. No, the whole system needs fundamental. It's flawed. It's totally flawed. And I hope that next year, no matter what the Parliament looks like, no matter who's in it, no matter who's there, I hope to God they can put their heads together and come up with some sort of solution on this, because otherwise we're not going to tackle it properly. And I just think that what angers me the most about the drug deaths issue is that there is a bill sitting there. Anne-Marie Waters wrote the bill, sitting there ready to go. Is it a silver bullet?
She's a pit. No, I know.
Absolutely no.
She would agree with that.
She'll say that. Anne-Marie would say that, and it's no silver. It's not going to solve the issue, but there's a solution that's there that we can look at, and it becomes a political football. It really frustrates me. And people like Anne-Marie who challenge the government then have their own issues because how dare you challenge my government? And I think it's shocking that that's where we got to in politics.
She's so brave. She's so brave, and the way she takes things on, and the way that she's the flack she's took for going to different parties because, like, different parties won't look at it. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And people saying how would you work with the Tories and how would you work with that? Anne-Marie doesn't care. Anne-Marie just wants it passed. She just wants the drug bill passed. Do you know what I mean?
And that's the point. It doesn't matter who takes it on, and it shouldn't matter who takes it on. It's about getting the legislation passed to help people's lives. And that's what politics should be at its core.
And I think all the parties need to come together on it. No, you're right. I think it's very interesting that we agree so much on that, Thomas. So, and the next point I'm going to move to, right, is like immigration. Obviously, that's a hot topic. So, immigration, I mean, I'm a bit of a conspiracy theorist that watches my stuff will kind of know that, right? No, I think that what we're watching here is a kind of manufactured immigration, illegal immigration that's been kind of ramped up to kind of stoke the kind of difference between the left and the right wing, and what you're getting is people. I mean, we could be on the brink of like some bad things happening in cities. Some cities are on a really powder keg.
You can feel it now. It feels like a boiling point.
Definitely, and I think all it's going to take is for one bad thing to happen, and I think it could tip. So I suppose I'm going to ask you a kind of big question. Where is this coming through? What's the cause of this?
So I think that firstly you're giving the elites far too much credit, because I think you're letting them think that they're smart enough to come up with some sort of manufactured. I don't think it's that at all. Yeah. I think that what's happened in the past 20 years in our politics is that we have the laziest politicians ever who have absolutely no principle, and who do not look at these issues properly and are no interested in it. And I think that's both Labour and Tory politicians and SNP politicians in Scotland. What I think has happened is that people like Nigel Farage have raised this issue time and time again and have been called far right. I remember David Cameron, he's a swivel-eyed loon, just sort of dismisses these arguments. So we don't talk about that. How dare you? Well, it was always been spoken about in communities that I came from, working class areas. Immigration was always spoken about. What's happened there the past number of years is there has been a skyrocketing amount of people who are coming here illegally, who are claiming asylum, who are not asylum seekers, right? These are young men, and predominantly young men anyway, who are coming here for economic reasons. And look, I don't blame the young guys for doing that, right? Because if you could see a better life for you, of course you're going to go for that. What I do blame is the governments that set the system up to allow that to exist. So you're right, there's a huge issue that's kicked off in politics across the UK, and I think in Scotland we believed, and by the way, I was part of the problem. I put my hands up and say I was part of the problem inside that City Chambers and inside the Scottish Tories. We believed that Scotland was immune from talking about immigration. There's a poll that came out this morning when I was coming in here that says that immigration is now the third biggest topic in Scottish politics. A Salvation poll and a Scotsman survey that came out that said immigration is now right up at the top of the list of Scottish people's viewpoints as well. And I think you can feel it because there's an anger out there. So when you look at the housing crisis, for example, in Scotland, it's impossible to look at Scotland's housing crisis, and Glasgow in particular's housing crisis, without discussing the fact of the number of asylum seekers coming to Glasgow. It's impossible to have that conversation because we now have more than half of Scotland's entire asylum seeker population in Glasgow alone. I think it's out of 6,100 or so beds. I don't have the figure to hand, but it's around 6,000 odd beds. Homelessness beds that we have in the city, over 4,000 of them are taken up by people who are waiting for asylum seeking decisions to be done by the Home Office. It's huge numbers, and it's skyrocketing. So there was a report of the council committee last week that says that Glasgow's got £110 million black hole in our finances. So we need to find £110 million in order to make the budget add up. 66 million of that is on the housing crisis. 36 million of that alone is on leave to remain asylum seeking decisions to be taken by the Home Office. It's a huge pressure. So there's something going on out there. The public are now waking up to it and getting really, really angry about it. And I don't think that Scotland's politicians are ready to have that conversation. You still have people like Susan Aitken and SNP politicians who are saying, we want everybody to come. We don't have the space, because for every person that comes into the country, we're not building another hospital to deal with that. We're not building another house to deal with that. We're not dealing with the pressures that puts in education. So we're not tackling the issues while everybody's all coming here. So there's a huge issue that's brewing that I think you're right. We're getting to a point of boiling. You can feel it in different communities. I put a TikTok video up about this the other weekend. It's probably the most viewed TikTok video I've put up and the most engaged. And by the way, the vast majority of it is young women. So when you look at the analytics, I think it's about 55% of young women.
Young women are scared at the moment, and I think that's no... So where I see it, right, is like... I've always, you've got like a, I don't know, there's a I suppose there's a migrant route. To me, every single westernised kind of country facing the exact same problem at the exact same time isn't a coincidence. It's slightly, although where
I disagree with that is that the vast majority of these asylum seekers who are coming from France. So they're travelling, they're still taking that treacherous journey.
No, what I mean is like Germany's seen this problem, Spain, like Norway, like all these, like every country.
But no at the levels that Britain is. And this is the point that I make, and this is a big argument I've always made.
Germany and France.
No, but they've so their big migrant issues were all kicking off when Angela Merkel and stuff were there. They've sort of tried to tackle it a bit more, I think, than what Britain has. And that's why you're seeing so many people crossing the English Channel to come here. So they're leaving a safe country in France. They're leaving Europe to come into Britain. So there's a reason as to why they're coming to Britain. And I would argue it's because they see our system as much more generous than they do in the rest of Europe, because they've managed to get hold of this. Our politicians have been so toothless to get hold of this. And that's where I think that Nigel has been really, really smart in getting the grip to this, because he spoke about this for the past 10, 15 years. This isn't something that Nigel Farage is jumping on a bandwagon about. He's been speaking about this for 10, 15 years. He was vilified because of this issue.
I'll give him that.
There was people who he can't go out without security around him now, because he's been vilified so much by people in political parties in the media because he spoke about this issue 10, 15 years ago. So I think that issue has to be fixed. And the Reform's going to put out a whole deportation sort of plan tomorrow. Nigel will be announcing all that, which will have tangible policies to tackle this issue head on. in Scotland, the biggest thing that we need to do, Glasgow is a dispersal city. So outside of London, we now take in more asylum seekers than anywhere else in Britain. It's huge. We're now the UK's asylum capital, right? Crazy numbers. I'm talking about it's vast numbers. That dispersal programme was signed up in 1999 and 2000 by the Labour Council at the time, right? No other Scottish city signed up to it, but Labour did. So Labour politicians should be held accountable for this because it was decisions that they made.
Where is it the migrants are coming from?
We don't know.
Is it more like the kind of Middle East, but Syria, that kind of?
So it's more Syria, Afghanistan, those sort of countries around the Middle East that are travelling up.
Would you like how? See, when you look at the Middle East, what do you think caused the people to want to move?
Oh, I think there's loads of different reasons as to why people wanted to move. As I say, there's an economic argument for many of them who are coming here because they want to be able to, get more money either on benefits or working or doing whatever they want to do here, and they're sending that money back home to then be able to support people. Again, I don't blame people for doing that. That's always happened,
if you know what I mean.
But knowing the numbers,
that's what I mean. So what do you think's caused the big numbers in the Middle East? Like,
I think a lot of the
crises
that have kicked off in the Middle East. So when you look at the Iraq war, when you look at the Afghanistan war, when you look at the change with the Taliban coming in, a lot of these changes have meant a lot of people feel unsafe in these countries now.
Who caused that? And who?
Well, look, you're not going to get me defending Tony Blair, by the way. No, it's not going to happen. There is plenty of reason as to why I think my first political experience I ever had was in 2007 attending an anti-Iraq war demonstration when I was in primary 7 with my Aunt Elaine. Best experience ever. It's where I got my kick off of politics. So you won't find me defending a lot of the foreign decisions of the British government.
We kind of caused a lot.
I think a lot of Western society has caused a lot of the issues that have existed. I really do. But I also think there's a huge cultural change that's happening as well, where our politicians are so out of touch with people on the ground that they don't understand what's actually happening. So a lot of these young men that we're taking in treat women very differently. They have different attitudes towards people because that's how they've been brought up. So that's then coming in here. So that's then impacting our people, that's then impacting our women. And whenever I say that, I'm accused of being far right, I'm accused of being racist. I've been reported to the police for a hate crime because I dared to say that if you're a illegal migrant who sexually assaults or attacks a woman, you should be deported. I was reported for saying that. I didn't know that was a controversial view to have. So I've said all this stuff publicly because I think it's really important that we get that message out there to so many people. Look at Falkirk last weekend. Over 1,000 people turned up outside a hotel to say their opinion when it came to one of the migrant hotels. 1,000 people in Falkirk compared to 200 anti-racist people who were all bussed in. That was 1,000 local people. Now, there was bad apples in that. Absolutely, there was people who shouldn't have been there, who were there to cause disruption, who were holding flags and making signs.
There's a lot of people that don't know what politics is, and they're just jumping on
bandwagons. And there are people in the far right who will use this to try and exploit, because there is a genuine far right. Reform's no far right, but there's a genuine far right who will try and use this to exploit divisions in society. Definitely. The same as there's a far left of people who try and use it to exploit it in their sides. There was 2 sides in Falkirk, and there was people on both sides who.
What would you think, like the Epping thing, and like with Tommy Robinson's thing on the 13th of September? And was that something you would attend, or?
No, Tommy Robinson, I think, is totally different for this whole argument. I think that a lot of the arguments that Tommy Robinson has made, I understand. Tommy Robinson as an individual is somebody who I don't align with at all, because I think that a lot of these issues has been exploited over the years to try and benefit people like Tommy Robinson. So I don't buy into that, right? So there's an individual basis as to why I don't agree with that. But I do give him credit for the grooming gang stuff, because I think that he was speaking about it, and so was Nigel and other people.
I agree with that.
I get that, but Tommy Robinson is not my politics. It's not where I sit whatsoever, and I think there's a huge difference in it. The problem in our politics...
The people that, like, because he's so big at the moment... he's probably kind of linked with Reform in a way.
Yeah, and he's no. And I think that's the problem in our politics, is that this is what the left love, right? They have conflated people who have sensible arguments against illegal migration and too many people come to this country and safety for women and everything else that's going on in our country. They've conflated that and then tried to brandish Nigel and Reform along with people who I think are trying to exploit these sort of things.
Nigel Farage did at one point jump on the bandwagon with Tommy Robinson.
Well, no, part of the reason that Nigel left UKIP was around Tommy Robinson. So Nigel's been consistent on this. I mean, if you look at Nigel Farage's politics, he's the person that killed the far right in British politics. The BNP were rising. Nigel Farage and UKIP were the reason that the BNP totally collapsed, because they started speaking about this issue, but they spoke about it in a much more open, transparent, honest way with the public about it. So I just think that the problem in our politics is that the left love conflating the idea of Nigel Farage with the far right because it benefits them politically because they try to turn people off it. If you think Nigel Farage is far right, then you're living in a totally different world, right? And Nigel Farage is he's a right-wing politician. Absolutely. He will tell you that himself.
Far right to me is like, I know what a far right person is.
And that's where
when you go extreme far left as well, that's like what you talking, like you're talking Castro and stuff like that. Like I don't like, do you know what I mean?
That's the difference, and that's where I think that the difference in our politics is when you conflate people from who genuinely I would say would be on the far right with just ordinary working people who are turning up angry at how their country's been run. So the 1,000 people I'm talking about in Falkirk, conflating 1,000 local people in Falkirk and calling them off far right. No wonder the people feel so scunnered with politics. No wonder they get so angry about where the political systems are going.
I agree with that.
Either politicians react to what the public are saying or they're going to have hell to pay. And I think that's where we're getting to in politics. And the immigration issue, I think we need to have a much more open, honest, grown-up debate around it. I've already said where I think we need to change. The dispersal city in Glasgow, for example.
How can we know, like, see, obviously, if it's so, like, obviously, like, if a Russian boat comes into the British waters, we can get that, we can tell straight away. Or like a jet or whatever comes into the waters, we can kind of tell straight away. How can we not stop these wee rubber boats coming over?
ECHR, the European Court of Human Rights, is the main reason. So the problem that we have in our country, this is part of what Nigel will outline tomorrow.
We're not really part of that anymore.
No, so we've left the European Union, but we're still full up members of the European Court of Human Rights, so we're still members of that. By the way, my
because
viewpoints,
obviously, like, what would happen if, like, Keir Starmer, because Keir Starmer keeps saying he's going to smash these gangs and stuff like that.
And he won't. Look, see until my viewpoints, by the way, in ECHR have evolved over time, because I was very much on the side of, no, we shouldn't leave this, why would we leave? To now, absolutely, the only way you're going to tackle illegal migration is by leaving the European Court of Human Rights and having a British Bill of Rights enshrined in law to support people's human rights that exist. But you need to leave these European conventions, because what's actually happening is that these rubber boats that are coming in, as you say, then have people who are coming to the country claiming that they're asylum seekers. Lawyers are then putting in appeals to the European Court of Human Rights against our government, and they're then winning, so these people are then able to stay. So it creates this system where people are then flocking into the country and they're not being deported out. So you're no deterring people from coming because they see Britain as an easy go-to, that's where we're going. So you need to leave the European Court of Human Rights. You need to start deterring people from coming to the country. You will never solve illegal migration as a whole. You're never going to be able to fix that. It's part of just the global world. It's been existing for hundreds of years.
Aye.
But the numbers that are coming, the sheer vast amounts of people are huge, and you need to start tackling
what kind of numbers are we talking?
Well, I top of my head, I can't remember, but you've seen like 1 million people, I think, over the past year come into the British Isles. It's somewhere around that. So it's huge, vast numbers. In Scotland alone, I think it was 3,450 something asylum seekers had claimed in Glasgow. So you're talking massive amounts of numbers for a city our size. So these are huge changes, and the biggest issues are they're coming in. We don't have enough houses built. We've got housing crisis already existing. We don't have enough houses built. We don't have enough GP appointments. We don't have enough places for them to be able to stay. They're then no integrating into society. So there's loads of different issues that are kicking off. In Scottish politics, what we need to have a serious conversation about is around Glasgow staying as a dispersal city. I think we have to leave. I think we have to pause Glasgow being a dispersal city. The Labour administration in 2000 decided to do that. I don't think that was the right decision at all. And we've seen that. And the other thing is that in 2012, I believe it was, Nicola Sturgeon, when she was Deputy First Minister, changed our homelessness legislation to say that if you're anybody at all and claim that you're homeless, you should be entitled to a homelessness unit. So a homelessness bed straight away. So what you're finding, and anybody will tell you this across the UK, that rule doesn't exist in England, Wales and Northern Ireland. So when you're granted leave to remain by the Home Office, so once you're up went through the system and you're granted and you've said you've got 30 days to find accommodation, otherwise we'll have to send you back, what they're all doing is coming to Scotland, claiming they're homeless, because they're then automatically given a homelessness bed. That's the two issues you need to try and solve in Scotland, as well as the bigger issues when it comes to migration across the whole UK. And I think that Scotland needs to have a grown-up debate around this. I don't think that we're getting there, though. I don't think our politicians are ready for that debate.
I think you'll struggle to find anybody in the UK at this moment in time who wouldn't say we need a better immigration policy. We need a stricter immigration policy. I think it's dangerous that you need to watch the kind of way that you speak. I think like language is so powerful. We say it quite a lot, and when you speak about certain things, like I don't blame like Islam and radical Islam and stuff like that. I don't agree with it. I think it's probably Disney, certainly radical Islam, Disney, as you say, like integrate into society. But neither does radical Jews or radical Christians or radical anything. Like, if you're radical, you're radical. So I think what we've got here is probably a lot of kind of Muslim people that aren't a problem, that aren't just want to live here peacefully and stuff. Probably feeling a bit scared now. Do you know what I mean? And the rhetoric that's getting flung about. Do you know what I mean? I think that's something that,
and it's where I get really angry, because this is where the likes of this group Stand Up to Racism, who I think are one of the most extreme versions of.
Who's this?
So this is one of these groups that pop up. They protest against people who are protesting.
Is this Antifa? No.
Yeah, it's all these sort of left-wingy groups that are all tossed into one. I think that they're dangerous, because what they do is they conflate people like myself, right, who they passionately disagree with my politics, fine. But when I defect to Reform, they call me a far-right councillor, they call me a racist councillor, they call me all this and that. I'm no, right? I know for a fact I'm no.
I can kind of tell based
I know I'm
no.
no. But what you do when you do that is you then conflate me speaking about illegal migration, of the number of people are coming, or just the vast majority of people who, these huge numbers that are putting pressure on our public services, are the vast majority of people who feel as if they're unsafe because there's been instances kicked off. We've seen in Falkirk, I think it was a 15-year-old girl that had been sexually assaulted by one of the illegal migrants. So when you start talking about these sort of issues, they then start conflating that with racism, and it's no, because I have nothing against people coming here, integrating in society, putting their hard work at it. Some of the most hard-working people I know are people for the Pakistani community, for example. Some of the most hard-working people I've ever met. So you conflate the whole issue, and you then create that bubble, and I think that's where people that Stand Up to Racism, that far-right summit that John Swinney had, all this sort of stuff, you then start conflating it, and what you do is you then pinpoint people to each side. So I don't think that the 1,000 people that were there in Falkirk last week are all Reform voters. I wouldn't for a second say they're all Reform voters. If they were, we're on track for a majority next year in May. They're honest, sensible, working people who feel as if their community has been taken advantage by a government that's not listened to them. That's where they all stand. And when you start brandishing them as they're far right, they're Nazis, they're this, they're that, you then pinpoint these people into feeling as if they have nowhere to go whatsoever. And that's where you genuinely then start to see people on the far right taking advantage of that. And that's where they have to be careful.
See, like, I don't see a problem with putting a British flag up. I don't see a problem. It's actually like, it probably is like whatever national. If you're a nationalist, you have a Scotland flag out. Do you know what I mean? I genuinely don't see the problem with that. Do you know what I mean? You can fly whatever flag you want, as far as I'm concerned. But what happens is when you go down a street and you genuinely see a St George's cross on every single lamppost, probably could be intimidating for some people. No, I'm not saying. But the thing is, there's a difference.
But the thing is, it shouldn't be, because this is the point that I'm getting with integration. It shouldn't be intimidating that in England there is an England flag and lampposts.
No, I'm not talking about that. But I'm talking about like if you're walking down a street and it's like.
I get what you're talking about, but this is the problem where we need to have proper integration. This is the point we need to get to proper integration, because if you're coming to this country, you should respect that we have flags places, and that should be whether that's the St George's flag, whether it's the Sultan, whether it's whatever it is.
We've always said, like, I mean, when I grew up, you always seen guys with like but Union Jacks on they're hanging out, some people in their garden.
And it shouldn't be intimidating to see that. So I get the point you're making, but the point I'm making is that if you find that intimidating, then you should start integrating into society properly to see why it is that people feel so proud of their country, why it is they want to fly these flags, why it is that they themselves feel patriotic. Because that's where we've kind of lost where Britain has went to the past 10, 20 years, is that we're no longer...
Some of the videos that I've seen, right, and I don't mean this in any other... But some of the videos I've seen out of, like, people steaming drunk, like, painting George's crosses on, like... Asian shops and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's different. That is proper intimidation.
I think
putting a flag up on your lamppost, I think, is something that you know.
By the way,
can I just say to anybody, see if you want to paint a salt tire in one of the potholes in Glasgow, you'll get it fixed quicker because the council will come in and sort your pothole straight away. So there's a quick solution for you. But that's the point, is that whether you're flying in Glasgow, it's very different. Whether you're flying a salt tire, whether you're flying an Irish flag, whether you're flying a Union Jack, to me it doesn't matter at all, because whatever you feel is your identity is up to you in terms of your nationality. But in your country, and this is particularly bad in Scotland, we've got to a situation where a flag can pinpoint your politics, who you are. I hate that. Everywhere I go, I'm not wearing a suit today, but everywhere I go, when I wear a suit, I wear a saltire. Saltire's my badge, right?
Yeah.
It's my flag. It's not the SNP's flag. It's not the Yes Movement's flag. It's not the Independence Argument's flag. It's my flag because I'm a proud Scotsman. I happen to believe that we're better as part of the United Kingdom, but I'm a proud Scotsman at heart. So I'll wear my saltire everywhere I go. So I think that there is a shift that has to happen in our culture where people can feel proud and patriotic of their country without feeling as if they're, they've been pinpointed as somebody. And I think it's quite bad in England. Scotland's slightly different, but in England it is quite bad where if you fly a St George's Cross, I remember the famous tweet from Emily Thornbury, there was a white van guy who had a St George's Cross flying for his house, and she tweeted it and says it all or something like that. I thought, what a sort of middle class attitude towards what people who just feel patriotic about their country.
No, I've got absolutely no.
So
no
integration
problem.
is key.
But I think if you look at like St George's Cross, you're looking at like the monarchy and stuff like that, and things like that, and King Charles is pretty positive on the Muslims.
Pretty liberal.
He really likes the Muslims, do you know what I mean? So he's really thinking about Islam and stuff, to the extent where a lot of kind of people on the right would go,
he's still my king, I'm still a monarchist, but I share some of the views that I think he can be a bit too political sometimes. So, no, I get that, and I think that's the key point. And the point I'm getting at is that I think that integration has to be key for all this stuff. So those who do come here legally have to integrate into your society properly. I don't think that's happened in the past few years.
No, I agree with you.
And I think that the sheer numbers that are coming in, it is right that people feel angry, upset, scunnered with our governments, because you don't see a migrant hotel popping up in Byers Road or in the middle class areas of Pollock Shields. No, you don't see that. What you see is that communities like mine in the East End are where these migrant hotels pop up, where these people then where people then feel unsafe, because it's the middle classes who like to lecture people about how refugees are welcome here, asylum seekers are welcome. Glasgow's a very welcoming city, because they don't have to live with what's happening in terms of if you're no integrating into society. So there's a big cultural change, I think, that's coming.
What is the kind of like, how see like crimes and stuff like that? What is the percentage wise and stuff? What's the
So off the top of my head I can't remember, but I think there's been, over the past year, if I remember correctly, there was a 41% rise in sexual assaults in Glasgow, something like that, in the city centre.
Is that
so? There's been huge.
Is it people charged and stuff? Is
yeah.
that
So and the government won't put out properly breakdowns as to what communities a lot of this come from, because they're worried it will stir up stuff. I don't think it would. I think openness and transparency is key in all this. I think if you want to try and deflate the whole argument around people coming here and people feel unsafe because of migrants, whatever else, then you need to start being honest with people about where a lot of this is coming from. And I don't think that our government is. So I think that has to happen. But there's been a huge surge in crime in the past year or so in Glasgow, as particular as a city. And it's not just shown in the figures, it's shown in how people feel. The amount of people who tell me they feel unsafe coming into Glasgow city centre at night. They feel unsafe travelling around places in Glasgow, particularly young women.
The people that are like wearing Palestinian t-shirts and that's been as a crime.
You're opening up a whole can of worms now. I try not to talk about Israel and Palestine
anymore.
No,
listen, it's a hot topic. But
I was nearly assaulted in a pub because I dared to say my viewpoint on this subject. No, look, I understand why Palestinian action has been put down the way that they are, and I think it was right that the government done that for that one organisation. If somebody wants to walk about with a Palestine t-shirt on or a flag, so be it. I don't think people realise how intimidating that can be to some other people, though. I think I've got loads of friends in the Jewish community who do find that intimidating. So I don't think they realise how intimidating that can be to other people. So I do think people need to be careful.
What, a Palestine flag?
But they can.
I think that's similar to like what then you would have like the St George's Cross and stuff. No,
it would slightly, although the St George's Cross is this country's flag. It's no another country. By the way, it would be the exact same if I was to say if somebody's wanting to wear an Israeli flag, right? So I'm not making a point one way or another, right? I'm not getting into that debate. What I'm saying is that say if you're an elderly Jewish person, and you see 10, 15 people running around with Palestinian flags, and you know the connotations that comes with because of the whole debate around Palestine and Israel. That can be intimidating. I think people need to be a bit more careful. I'm not saying that you walk with a Palestinian flag in Buchanan Street, you should be arrested.
Anybody that's been assaulted by like Palestinian, is there?
No. I know there has been.
I know yourself. Obviously.
I know for a fact that there has been.
Is there massive
So there is
attacks
a
and stuff,
stall that takes place in Buchanan Street every week called the Glasgow Friends of Israel. I've been to them a couple of times, a number of times, loads of times. I support them.
Yeah.
So I've been there and supported them. I know for a fact that some of the elderly people who are there have been assaulted.
Yeah.
I know that they get stuff routinely shouted at them, vicious stuff shouted at them. I attended a vigil outside the art gallery in Kelvin Grove last year, where it was a vigil for the people who had died since the October the 7th hostage situation that kicked off in Gaza. And there was a counter demonstration that turned up to a vigil for people who had died. There was people who were there who had survived the Holocaust, who were standing there listening to the most abhorrent things ever been shouted at them by another side. I've never been in a situation where there's a counter protest to a vigil. Right?
No,
Debate around this issue, I understand the sensitivities around it. I totally understand why people, support the Palestinian cause. I get that. I really, really do. And I don't think that people understand that.
It's hard to watch a genocide and watch like.
Well, I dispute the word genocide on that, but I get the point. I really do. I understand. I was the first Scottish Conservative politician, by the way, to call for a ceasefire last year, right? So I get the argument.
I think when you're talking about when you've got like Ben Gavir and stuff like that, I mean.
But I think that the whole fight around the Israel-Palestine thing in our society has become so toxic that we have to try and tone it down slightly.
I agree.
And I think that the difference between somebody walking about with a Palestinian T-shirt on shouldn't be arrested, right? Freedom of speech, whatever else. Disagree with them for doing it, but fine.
Somebody with a Palestinian flag.
No, that's fine. But
Right.
What's different is that it's the Palestine Action Group and it's supporting that. That's the issue, because what they've done is they've broken into RAF sites and vandalised military aircraft and all this sort of stuff. That is right, that people should be held accountable for what they've done. The same way that any organisation that does that should be held accountable for what they've done. So there's two very different conflicting arguments around there. But the whole Palestine-Israel debate is so sensitive and so toxic sometimes that trying to have a sensible viewpoint on it just gets kind of washed out, and you end up becoming one way or another.
This is only my viewpoint on it. I think when you watch, like, you've got like Benjamin Netanyahu, I think, who's one of the most vile human beings, with Ben Gavir and people like that. I think, listen, I love Gabor Mate. There's a few like Jewish people. I've not got a problem like at all with normal Jewish people. The people in the Israeli government are not normal at this moment in time.
No, and I think that's what angers me about this whole debate around Israel and Palestine. So I am a supporter of the state of Israel, right? I am a proud supporter of the state of Israel. I support a two-state solution, right? I want a Palestinian state alongside an Israeli state. I think that's the only way that you could probably solve this issue, right? But I am a full supporter of the state of Israel. Doesn't mean I'm a supporter of Benjamin Netanyahu. I agree with you, some of the stuff that you'd say about Benjamin Netanyahu. I think that this is a man who's deeply divisive, who's trying to continue this because he knows that his political career is in serious jeopardy once this all stops because of corruption.
Want to go to jail.
Right, so because of corruption charges. And I think the Israeli people would say that as well. But this is the big difference, and this is what angers me about this whole debate, is that you conflate it into you're this side or you're that side. There's no in between, right? So I support a two-state solution. As I said, I was the first Scottish Conservative politician to call for a ceasefire. I support the state of Israel, but I don't support Benjamin Netanyahu. But that's no enough for people on one side. So I then have people who, call me a genocide supporter. I have people who turn up in pubs who try to assault me. I have, the only time that I've had to have taxis funded by the council to travel around this city was because of this issue. Yeah. Because my safety was at risk and I had to be travelled around the city on private cars. So in the taxpayer expense on public taxis, and in my own expense when I was doing private stuff, so me, my family and stuff with it, my house had security checks. I now carry a panic button. My fiance has to carry a panic button. My gran has to carry a panic button, all because of this one issue, because it becomes so conflated. When actually I think that the viewpoint I have is probably the viewpoint that the vast majority of the people have, which is there should be a two-state solution, a ceasefire absolutely, but a supported Israel state as well. I think that's the viewpoint of the vast majority of people.
I don't support that, the two-state thing, but what I think, I don't think you can get away from the fact that Israel's the big bully there. You say that. I disagree with that argument. I don't agree with Hamas, by the way. Like,
I disagree with the idea.
Hamas,
I disagree.
If you take Hamas, you would maybe have what? They reckon about 40,000. So you've got 2 million people starving in Gaza because of 40,000. Now, I don't know how if you know how effective Mossad are, but they're very effective at what they do. You've got a trapped population in there. Mossad could eradicate Hamas quite quickly. If you look at Netanyahu and stuff like that, he paid like nearly £15 billion through Qatar and stuff to fund.
But that's what I was going to say.
Hamas.
So again, we're getting into the conversations about the current Israeli government and Hamas,
So
and that's different from the two-state solution.
I don't think you can disassociate for that. Then
no,
at
I
this
do,
moment in
because
time.
I don't think that Israel is the big bad bully in all of this at all. I don't. What happened on the 7th of October, right, was that Hamas attacked Israel, took hostages, and brutally murdered so many, innocent Israeli lives, and took people hostage. Israel at that point had its right to defend itself and to do what they had to do, right? Now, we're now, 2 and a bit years into this whole conflict that's kicked off.
Doing it.
That's where you then start to have a different of opinion. So the reason I was, painted as this big evil, big supporter of Israel was because there was a ceasefire motion 2 weeks after that had happened in Glasgow City Council, and I couldn't back a ceasefire at that point because we were 2 weeks after this had happened.
So would you kind of be in hanging, getting rid of Ben Gavir and
this is my personal opinion. This is no reforms opinion. I don't know where reforms sit in this. My personal opinion is the current Israeli government are intentionally trying to continue this on, but it's totally different. I think that Israel has its right to defend itself. It's why I don't support the word genocide.
I think debate because getting driven by extremists.
But I don't believe so. Netanyahu's a totally different subject. But the reason that I don't support using the word genocide, the reason I'm no fully supportive of Palestine as a whole, is because there's still hostages there. Hamas are still holding people hostage. So until every hostage is released, I don't think it's right that we put massive amounts of pressure on Israel until they have their citizens back. The same way that if this was a conflict between any other country, we would be having the same arguments. Same with Ukraine and Russia, for example. I'm massively supportive of Ukraine because they were attacked by the Russians. They should be supported in trying to get their land back and their people back. But that's the different
Putin
fight.
could defend himself.
But Hamas are able to defend themselves.
Are they?
They have done. They have done massively. That's part of the reason this conflict is continuing.
I don't know.
And the point I'm getting at is,
I honestly don't know. I'm only
Hamas.
The lens
when you look at the tunnels under Gaza, when you look at all that sort of stuff that exists that Hamas have been able to do, they're
definitely
Hamas is a deaf cult essentially.
Israel
that's
are
there.
An actual army like the IDF and that.
So is Hamas. Hamas were there as they have people there that are soldiers as well. So look, I think that
funded
the point
by
the
Israel,
point, well, that's disputed. But I think
it's
the
no,
point,
it's
the
fact.
point,
That's
the
fact.
point,
I'll send you. I'll send
the
you.
point around all this, and this is I didn't want to get into this debate.
I know.
I know what's going to happen here, which is that this will be our whole podcast. This will be the bit that's going to go viral, where everybody starts calling me a genocide supporting evil Nazi. But the point I'm getting at is, just let me finish this one point because I think it's really important. I support Israel surviving as a state. I support a free Palestinian state, the same as the Glasgow Friends of Israel support around the corner when they hold their stall on Saturday. Their slogan is pro-Israeli, pro-Palestinian, pro-peace. That's what they say, and I fully support them. I supporting the Jewish community, who have had a massive threat that's existed since this all kicked off because the tensions have been so heightened. But I also support a ceasefire. I support humanitarian aid getting into Gaza, and I support. You can't watch the images that are on your TV and no feel heartbroken. I've got a 2.5-year-old son. I can't look at a kid who's dying in Gaza and no feel heartbroken at what's going on. But you then have to take your emotion out and look at the fact that Hamas attacked Israel on October the 7th. Israel had the right to defend themselves. It's going on for a bit too long now. But until Hamas releases all the hostages, I think that Israel is right to defend themselves as much as they can. I don't think it's right that Benjamin Netanyahu continues brutally assaulting the way that they're doing it, but I think that the Israeli people have the right to get the hostages back. And I think that's the problem in our country, is that this has become too conflated. And the last thing I was going to say is I don't support Israel as the bully, because it's the only state I know who is surrounded by people who disagree with them being there. Every country more or less around Israel wants to obliterate Israel. Look at Iran; it's in their constitution.
You can't have.
So I support
have somebody like Netanyahu, right?
But this is the point.
What you're saying is you don't agree with his government.
But this is the point.
You don't. You do you know what I mean? It's
this is the point. I disagree. I disagree with Keir Starmer. Doesn't mean I don't agree with Britain existing as a state.
No,
this is where
at this moment in time, Keir Starmer's no white in Scotland.
But we become too conflated in personalities in this. I can support Israel remaining as a state while disagreeing with Benjamin Netanyahu, which is what many Jewish people around the world would probably say. They know.
I think
this whole debate became too conflated.
I've seen a lot of kind of Israeli people actually really calling it as a genocide, and then I'm very proud of them doing that. Loads of Jewish people have called it a genocide, and I think calling it anything less, and it's only my opinion, Thomas, is calling it anything less as taking away the kind of the actual reality of what's happening there.
I wouldn't use the word genocide. I get why people do, but I wouldn't use the word genocide. But look, I've said I know for a fact that this is the part that's going to be clipped and used against me.
Do you know what? We'll move on because it's a topic we don't agree. We don't see eye to eye. And listen, as we both want peace there. We both want Palestine and Israel in a two-thing state. So moving on, obviously what I just obviously we're kind of coming up to the end of the podcast. So where do you kind of see Reform moving next at the general election, because it is looking like they could be the party that takes. Where do you see yourself coming in to play?
Look, me personally, I've still to decide properly if I'm going to put my name forward for the Scottish Parliament yet for next year. I'm probably on the side that I will, but I've still to make that final decision myself. Where I see Reform going is I've said this to loads of different people over the past 8 months. I think the sky's the limit. And if you ask me why, it's because when I joined the party in January, right, I was branded as being delusional. I was Reform's 5th councillor that joined at that point. There was only 4 other people that had joined. I was the most high-profile person that had joined the party. We had less members than the Scottish Tories, and we were polling around about 12% in Scotland. Still really good, but still pretty low. When you look at the time since I've joined, in that 8 months, we now have, I think it's 16 councillors over Scotland, and there'll be more announcements in the next couple of weeks, so you'll see that number will continue to grow, I suspect. So we are now at 16 councillors. We are polling on average around about 18 to 22% in the polls. So some polls have us second place in Scotland, some polls have us just under Labour. The Hamilton by-election, we were 1,500 votes away from winning that seat. If the Tories hadn't stood in that seat, we would have won that seat. We were 900 votes away from Labour. We've seen by-elections in local councils where we are, 900 votes behind the SNP, where we've overtaken Labour and Clydebank, these sort of big transformational things. We now have 11,000 members in Reform in Scotland. So we now have more members than Alba, the Greens, Scottish Conservatives, the Lib Dems. I think we're around 1,500 members away from Labour. Yeah. So that's the context as to where we are. So when I say that the sky's the limit, I genuinely mean that, because I don't know where this is going to go. You're right, polling right now would indicate that Nigel Farage is going to be Britain's next Prime Minister. Polling can shift dead quickly. We're only a year into this. We all forget this is only a year and a bit into this Labour government. Things can move extremely quickly. But I think that where our politics are heading is to a much more value-based, principled argument away from the left and right of the past and onto the right versus wrong and where our society is going. I think it's exciting for Reform. It's also challenging. It'll have huge challenges for us over the next year, 2 years, 3 years, because there'll be new personalities that'll come in, there'll be different faces that'll be there. But I think it's really exciting for where Reform can go. And the point I'm making about why the sky's the limit is right now, as I said when we're talking about the immigration debate, when I joined Reform, we were told immigration is not a big issue in Scotland. I remember sitting in a podcast like this with a guy for the BBC who said to me, but immigration's needed in Scotland. We need more immigrants to come. I mean, Reform's out of touch. Well, I'm now sitting here in August, and immigration is now the 3rd highest topic in polling in Scots. If that trajectory continues, I don't know where Reform can go. I think the SNP are extremely complacent about us. I think John Swinney's dismissive attitude towards Reform stinks of arrogance. I don't think they see the threat that's there. I think Labour's even worse. I think Anna Salwar has to wake up and smell the coffee about where politics is heading. And I'm dying for the day to be able to debate him on policy, because I think me and Anas are totally different in politics. I think that he is exactly everything I think is wrong with politics. He's a middle-class posh boy who went to private school who likes to lecture people in my community. Well, I'd love to be able to debate him, because I'd love to see his argument about, rich people, this and that, about Reform, when he's speaking to somebody who grew up under a Labour government, under a government that he supported when he was an MP, that he backed, that done all this sort of stuff. So I'd love that debate. So I think that the politics is moving very quickly. I think it's moving in Reform's favour, but I don't know where it's going to go, is my honest answer. It could go up, it could crash down, it could be anywhere.
Thomas, I think you've got with Reform, I think, and as you say, it can move, but I think Reform is certainly going to be here. We're at an exciting point in our politics, and as I said, look, when I made this decision in January, I could have done the easy option, right? My easy option was to go and get a nice job in the private sector, do 2 more years in Glasgow City Council, make some money and leave politics. That would have been the really easy option. The other easy option was for me to sit in the Scottish Tories in
at some point, although they like to brief against me now, I was their golden boy. I was their working class guy tossed on the telly all the time. So this idea I was some big, bad, evil careerist is nonsense. They love to portray me as that now. But at the time, I was their golden boy. So I would have had a career in the Scottish Conservatives as well. It would have been safer for me to just stay in the party I was in. I took a gamble by joining Reform because, as I said, for the first time in about 2 years, I genuinely, passionately believe what I'm talking about. I feel like I'm in a party that understands my community.
I get that. I get it. I listen to him.
So it could blow up in my face. It could blow up in my face. It could be that this time next year I'm sitting as a wee lonely councillor in Glasgow City Council just doing my job. I don't see that being the case at all, because I think that politics has shifted so quickly. And I think that from my point of view, even if that did happen, I at least know I'd done what I thought was right.
Yeah.
And there's the big changing point for me politically, and I said 2.5 years ago with the Tories for my shift, was because my son was born. And politics becomes very real when you have a tangible, something in this country. I used to enjoy sitting in the city chambers and having the political debates, Susan Aitken's this, Labour's that, and you'd have a fight back and forward, and it was good fun. You'd leave the chambers and it's like a uni society. Mm-hmm. That all ends when Joshua came here, because I was then looking at it and saying, what am I achieving by standing up and just attacking people? What am I actually doing? What's the country going to look like for his future? There is now this beautiful wee boy who's here, who is going to be my legacy. No matter what happens, he's my boy.
Aye.
So I can either put my convictions on the table and say, this is what I want to fight for, and then be able to look him in the eye when I'm older and say, I missed some of your skill shows. I missed being able to be there with you, but the reason I missed it was because I was fighting for your future. And if that blows up in my face, I can at least tell him I was true to myself. And that's a big shift that I've had. So whether it blows up, whether it doesn't, for me personally, I know I've made the right decision, because I genuinely believe that the only hope this country has now is that Nigel gets into number 10 and we start to fix some of the big issues. There will be stuff that I disagree with.
Do you think Jeremy Corbyn's a threat?
Not to Reform. I think he's a threat to everybody else. And I think that Labour and the SNP...
I
and
like
the
Jeremy
Greens,
Corbyn.
I respect Jeremy Corbyn. I disagree massively with his politics. I think he is dangerous in terms of politics, because I think that the sort of divisive politics we're talking about when it comes to the Middle East, he exploits to benefit himself. So I don't agree with that side of his politics. But the guy,
I mean, he's been like the way you say about Nigel. He's been consistent.
No, that's what I was going to say.
He took a lot of flack.
That's what I was going to say there.
So I because now you can say things about Israel, and it's no.
I was going to say so that side of him I disagree with, right? And when you look at some of the stuff he's said in the past about the Middle East, or when it comes to sort of Irish nationalism and all this sort of stuff, which is a whole different debate. I'm not getting into that one with you. But that whole thing that I disagree massively, because I think he's a divisive figure with that. But as I was going to say, he's a principled guy who's said the same things for 20, 30 odd years. My argument with him is he's stuck in the past. He's fighting for a socialist society that we tried in the 70s and it didn't work. But I can understand why he's fighting for it and understand his principles. So he's not a threat to Reform. Mm-hmm. He is a massive threat in Scottish politics to both the SNP and the Greens. I think Labour less so, because I think that Scottish Labour's voter base is now essentially a middle class, liberal sort of Ruth Davidson-y type of voter that's went to Scottish Labour. So I think that those sort of socialist principles that are, if you're a Labour supporter, are maybe there.
See somebody like myself who's got that kind of socialist value and looking, I don't know who to vote. I probably wouldn't vote. I don't know who I would. I think there's nobody there that I would go, that's my guy.
And I think there's loads of people.
Corbyn's
like
probably the closest, but again, I'd need to look. He's only really started out, and I don't know where he's going, and so I need to look. But I like Jeremy Corbyn. But what would you say a guy like myself? Why should I vote Reform?
So my argument to anybody is see if anybody watching this podcast, other than the Middle East debate, I think that me and you found a lot of stuff that we probably massively agree on.
Yeah.
Because for the first time ever, we've been able to sit and have a conversation. It's not about a quick tweet on social media.
It's not about debate.
It's about talking about policy issues. My argument to anybody, whether you've been on the left or whether you've been on the right of politics in the past, is that those days are gone. It's now between right and wrong, right? People in working class communities don't have the luxury of sitting back and debating socialism versus capitalism. They don't. What they have the luxury of doing is, can my gran get a GP's appointment? Can my mum get a good job? Can my Waynes get a good education? That's where they're looking at politics, and they see the politicians as totally failing on that. Reform's whole ethos is to get in there and rip up the system. So whether you like everything that we say, whether you don't like everything we say, the idea of a party going into the Scottish Parliament for the first time in the 25 years that it's been there, and being able, actually, to be fair, sort of what Tommy Sheridan done when he was there with the SSP, although we're totally different politically, but getting in there and showing something different, changing the dynamics, changing the politics, being there to vocalise the sort of anger that exists in Scotland's working class communities, I think is exciting. So Reform's whole ethos is to get in there to rip up the system. And by the way, I suspect there's loads of people in different parties who want to rip up the system as well, so we'll be consensual in trying to work with them. Mm-hmm. But the idea that devolution isn't the problem, it's the politicians that are the problem in Scotland. And I would urge anybody to vote Reform, because it gives us a chance to get people in there who are no for the normal political class. You know, people will call me a careerist, people will call me whatever they want to call me,
Alba,
but people will look at me very differently.
People know vote out, like, because obviously Alba tends to be a party that's moving like for the independence, and it's got guys like Tommy and stuff like that, and other people, Ash Regan and things like that. Like, why would you say people shouldn't vote for that?
Well, two reasons. Firstly, independence, right? I don't agree with independence. Alba's where my cup of tea is, but even if you're a pro-independence supporter, I think anybody can look at politics that are the next 5 years or so, independence is dead, right? The constitutional argument is done, it's finished with, it's put to bed, and it's now about trying to fix the country the way it is. So voting for an independent supporting party that doesn't really have much support in Scotland, as we're seeing with Alba in the polls, would be a wasted vote in that argument. Secondly, it's stuck in the past slightly. So Ash Regan, I think, is a really interesting politician, although I disagree with a lot of the stuff that Ash says. I think she is very interesting as a politician. But she stood for the leadership and she got beat by a guy who is literally the epitome of the SNP old guard establishment in Kenny McCaskill. Tommy, nice guy. Well, I'm assuming I've never actually met Tommy Sheridan. But again, somebody who's, I would argue, stuck in the past slightly. You know, these are figures for the 1990s who are now leading the new revolution of Alba. That's not going to work, because these are the people who were there. So I think that the argument that Alba has is slightly fell away because Ash Regan didn't get the leadership, so I don't really think there's anywhere for them to go. The constitution is dead, and if you want to rip up the system in Scotland, if you want real change properly, then actually I would argue Reform is the only option that's existing now. Corbyn's party might come in, George Galloway standing in certain areas.
I like George Galloway,
I get the dynamics of these people in it, but the only party that's really polling at a level, being able to shake up the political system, that's giving John Swinney and Anna Sarwar nightmares, that's making them sweat, is Reform, because we're breathing down their neck. No, and I think that's my argument to people, is if you want to send a massive message next year that you're sick, fed up with the political establishment, even if you don't agree with every single policy that I have to say, you can understand if you watch this podcast that what I'm saying is coming for the heart. It's principle for me. It's not about careerism. It's not about pushing myself forward. It's where I comfy passionately in my heart of hearts. You can disagree with me in policy, but I don't think anybody would watch me and think that I'm going in there to do what I want to do.
You've come on here again, and like you've no asked, no scripted. You didn't ask me to no talk about any subjects. You didn't say I'm no talking about that. You were like, so you've came here totally like. So I've got big respect for you, and I've got a lot of respect for a lot of the stuff that you talk about. I don't agree with a lot of the politics and stuff, but that's. I think this is what we need to get, is more healthy debate, more people talking about things, putting it in layman's terms for people like that are out there, do you know what I mean? Because some people are, especially in the working class communities, are kind of disillusioned with what's going on, do you know what I mean? They really don't know, they're maybe no, like they don't get the big political words, or they don't get like the kind of buzzwords that are going about, do you know what I mean, and stuff like that. And so
that's what I think. See, if anybody looks at my record, I think you'll see that I sometimes get myself in trouble because I'm under up how I speak. People slag the way that I talk because I use the word like punters and stuff like that. I'm never going to apologise for being a working class guy for the East End of Glasgow. That's what you want. If you want a polished career politician, go and get one. You're not going to get that with me. What you'll get is somebody who's young, enthusiastic, but who grew up in one of the most difficult circumstances. And I would argue I've got more life experience than half of Scotland's politicians.
You can't argue with that.
Because of where I came from.
No, you can't argue with that.
So the principles I wear in my sleeve. It's a
weird thing with me. Like,
so the principles I wear in my sleeve are the principles that I passionately believe in. You might disagree with me in fundamental issues when it comes to independence or when it comes to a certain topic, fine. But the idea that I would go into the Scottish Parliament, or any of the people who I stand in the way in Reform are going to go in the Scottish Parliament to just bend there and do what we're told, is nonsense. I'm going in there because I want to shake the place up. The same as I've done at the City Chambers. I am despised by half of the councillors in there, if no more of them. And I love it. I'm not in there to make pals. I'm not in there to be best of friends with SNP and Labour councillors who've been there for 20 years. I'm in there to make sure my voice is heard and my constituents are heard, and that's the exact same as what Reform will be doing in the Scottish Parliament. We're going in there to shake the place up.
I do respect that. And so see, just as we're coming up, this kind of to the end of the thing. And listen, I've really enjoyed this debate. I think it's been a healthy debate. It's been, and anything that we've spoke about should be taken out of context. It is what it is. We've got different views, and anything that we speak about, it's been healthy, and that we're not walking away, falling out with each other or anything like that. So please take it in the context that it's just opinions. So I'll give you the kind of last message for anybody, like anybody that's watching. Just kind of the last message for anybody that's watching. Thomas, I always do.
Like the only thing I would say to people is that I get the noise in politics. I understand it, right? I get that I am sometimes seen as controversial, sometimes seen as divisive. I would ask anybody to watch this podcast to see if they genuinely can argue that I am in this for any other reason other than the values I support. And I actually fundamentally believe that the only option this country has properly been able to rip up the system, whether you're left, right, whatever you might be, to get our politics back on track and start standing up for working class people, is with Reform. It's why I'm there. It's why I'm fighting for it. It's why I'm very proud of the fact that Reform obviously support me that much, that I'm being pushed massively today, a lot of the media stuff for them, because they see me as an authentic voice who genuinely stands up for people. So I'm a straight talker. I say it as it is. And if people don't like it, fine. There's more politicians to go and vote for. But I hope they at least understand where I come from politically. And I think that's the only thing I ever ask people. Judge me. I get loads of comments, loads of trolls, loads of names called, all that sort of stuff. Fine, that's part of the game. But judge me on what I actually have done. And if I think if you look at my record or you look at any of the stuff I say, I'm passionate about the stuff that I care about.
No, listen, honestly, I have big respect, man. Obviously, as we say, don't see eye to eye on some things, but a lot of things we do. And this is where we need to get, we need to start looking at the things that we do agree on and things that we can change, do you know what I mean? And looking at the things that we can maybe agree on. So, Thomas, thank you very much for coming on. It's been great having you on. And,
no, it's been good fun.
Thank you. Cheers.